Tetsuya is a magical super soldier who acts like a weak bum to live a regular life. After enrolling to the Magic Academy with his obsessive sister from Alabama, he somehow attracts all the baddies in school and accidentally rizzes them up. It all starts on Tetsuya's first day as a student of the country's best magic academy. While he gets excited to start, his hot sister Miyuki, who also just enrolled, gets upset about him being admitted as a reserve student because he is actually the most overpowered magician of all the students. He immediately tells her to keep that information to herself because no one can know about their true identities in school. So she runs ahead to prepare for the opening ceremony. Minutes later, he enters the hall and notices how the students with flower prints on their uniforms, who are also called blooms, avoid those like him, called weeds. He ignores this and finds a seat at the back. But then two girls named Mizuki and Erika join him and start up a conversation. After Miyuki gives a speech, the girls invite him to the homeroom, but he refuses, saying he has to find his sister. Mizuki asks if Miyuki and he are siblings because she sensed very similar auras from both of them. Upon realizing that she has magic sight that allows her see the true nature of anyone, he gets worried that she might figure out his secret and considers avoiding her. Just then, Miyuki shows up, so he cups her face to congratulate her on becoming the new student representative, but this causes Erika to think they are from Alabama. Later that night, Tetsuya tries to get some work done, but then he notices Miyuki's bad mood and asks if she is okay. She then tells him about a call she got from their father congratulating her and gets pissed that the family has chosen to treat Tetsuya like an outsider. As she starts losing control of her powers, he grabs her hand and tells her not to worry about it. So she presses up against him to set the mood for their late night workout.
Yeah, boy.
The next day, Tetsuya tries to work on his combat skills in a dojo, but his creepy master, Yakumo, tries to grab Miyuki's melons, so Tetsuya attacks him, only to get whooped in front of everyone. After Miyuki uses her magic to fix his clothes, they head to school where another classmate named Leo gets intrigued by Tetsuya's speed with the keyboard and decides to join them for lunch. However, when Miyuki also tries to join them, a Bloom student named Shun and his group of slow-brained stagehands tell Miyuki to sit with them instead. He explains that it's simply wrong for a Bloom to sit with peasants. Leo gets pissed and challenges Shun, so they meet up again after school closes to duel. At first, Miyuki gets stomach butterflies at the thought of Tetsuya fighting to spend time with her. But when Shun and his friends start activating deadly skills, she gets worried. However, the moment they charge in, the student council president, Mayumi, freezes their powers, and a member of the disciplinary committee named Mary immediately asks for sign statements because using magic skills against each other is strictly forbidden. The next moment, Tetsuya walks up to her and claims Shun and his friends were just trying to teach them a couple of new skills, so they decide to let it slide. The next morning, Tetsuya and Mizuki run into Mayumi, who then asks to speak with both of them during lunch. Hours later, they enter the council office, so Mayumi introduces them to Rin, the treasurer, and Azusa, the secretary, before also saying that Hanzo is actually the vice president. After explaining how they vote for new members of the council, Mayumi asks Mizuki if she would like to join as their new member, so she takes a look at Tetsuya, who then gives her the signal to accept. All of a sudden, she starts explaining how skilled and talented Tetsuya is. So he tries to stop her, but she ignores him and asks Mayumi to give him a spot on the council instead. Rin then tells her to forget about it, as they have never let a weed join the council, and will certainly not be changing tradition for the both of them. Upon hearing this, Mizuki apologizes for overstepping and accepts the position. However, Mary suddenly reminds Mayumi that the last spot on the disciplinary committee is still open. And since there is no rule about the kind of students allowed to join, she suggests giving the spot to Tetsuya. Mayumi excitedly agrees to this, but Tetsuya tells them to pump the brakes because he doesn't even know what the disciplinary committee does. After Mary explains that they basically punish or fight students who try to use their magic illegally, he reminds her that he doesn't have any magic skill fit for combat, but she tells him to come back after classes so they can talk about it a little more. Shortly after this, he and Mizuki join Leo and the others in a magic training room to assess their abilities. And after Tatsuya realizes that he has even less control than before, he decides to decline Mary's offer. After classes, he and Mizuki return to the council room, and Hanzo makes it a point to treat him like a peasant by only greeting Mizuki before telling Mary not to let a weed like Tatsuya join them. Mary immediately warns him about discriminating against a fellow student and says the whole point of electing Tatsuya is to stop the whole idea of reserve students being treated like peasants. Despite this, Hanzo insists on not letting Tatsuya join them and tries to convince Mayumi instead. But then Mizuki tells him that the only reason Tatsuya didn't get accepted as a bloom is because the method of assessment was not compatible with his skill. She also claims that Tatsuya can definitely handle himself against a bloom, but Hanzo tells her to stop the cap because that is simply not possible, given the fact that he can't even use a basic C/D. The next moment, Tatsuya holds Mizuki back and challenges Hanzo to a duel. In a training room several minutes later, he loads up his magic Glock and explains that he always has to carry magic weapons since he can use a C/D like the average student. After Mary explains the rules, Hanzo gets excited to take him down and cooks up a plan to deliver a lightning-fast attack using his C/D. As soon as Mary gives them the signal, he activates the C/D, but Tatsuya suddenly becomes the Flash and shoots him in the back in a split second. After the girls prop Hanzo up against a well, Azusa asks Tatsuya if his magic Glock is a silver horn, and Mayumi immediately asks if she is talking about the silver horn made by Taurus Silver, a legendary but mysterious magic engineer who specializes in four-leaf technology. As she frantically tries to grab hold of the gun, Hanzo finally wakes up and admits to being wrong for underestimating Tatsuya's abilities. However, after apologizing to Miyuki, he walks out without saying another word to Tatsuya. Minutes later, Mary takes Tatsuya back to the council office and apologizes for the mess. But then he offers to help her clean it up and says he hates being around such a dirty environment. While cleaning up, she continues explaining his new role in the disciplinary committee and admits that it will be extremely difficult since he would have to face multiple seniors who will definitely hate the idea of being bossed around by a reserve student. Just then, her brother and his friend return from patrolling around campus to give her a report, and after noticing Tatsuya, they start asking questions. Mary then tells them to make the mistake of underestimating him because Hanzo is probably still struggling with the concussion he got from their duel earlier. Upon hearing how Tatsuya defeated him, they both get shocked because Hanzo has actually been undefeated since he first joined the academy. They both proceed to welcome Tatsuya to the committee and say they don't have a problem working together as long as he does his job correctly. Later that night, Miyuki asks Tatsuya to reconfigure her C/D to handle high-speed activations like what he did during the duel with Hanzo. After he agrees to it, she casually strips right in front of him. Beautiful! But he remains unfazed, like her glistening plot cannons mean nothing to him. Minutes later, she climbs out of the configuration chamber and suddenly throws her melons on his back before asking if he doesn't think she is attractive. After also asking if he enjoys talking to other girls more, she grabs his hand and gets even closer, so he starts fighting the urge to unleash his magnum. The next moment, she pulls him out of the seat, but instead of getting freaky, she presses a button to upgrade his stats and apologizes for going overboard. The next day, Mary calls every member of the disciplinary committee for a meeting, and after introducing Tatsuya and Shun, who happens to also be a new member, she sends them out to begin patrolling. After asking for permission to use some of the committee's equipment, Tatsuya grabs two old model C/DS, but on his way out, Shun tells him to get over himself because there is no way a loser like him can activate magic with two C/DS. Several minutes later, Tatsuya spots a bunch of girls literally pulling Erika's clothes apart in a bid to make her join their clubs, so he activates his high-speed skill and takes her to a private spot. However, he gets an eyeful of her perfect melons.
Nice.
So she decides to turn him into her personal bodyguard as punishment. Minutes later, she takes him to watch a boring sparring match between Kendo Club members. However, things suddenly take an interesting turn when Taikaki, leader of the Kenjutsu Club, shows up with his boys to take over the dojo. After Sayaka reminds him that the Kendo Club still has the dojo for at least an hour, Takaki challenges her to a duel and promises not to use any magic, so Tatsuya decides to stay back. However, after Sayaka easily lands the first hit, Takaki activates his CAD and starts attacking her, so Tatsuya rushes in and pins Takaki down before calling for backup. Upon seeing this, the other members of the Kenjutsu Club try to attack him, so he starts taking on the entire team while Sayaka's captain, Kino, stops her from interfering. Much later, Tatsuya ends up in the council office explaining how everything went down in detail, and after he says that Takaki owned up to his mistakes, Mary decides to let him off with a warning before asking a chiseled man-beast named Katsudo for his opinion. After taking a moment to think about it, Katsudo decides to also let Takaki off with a warning, but Mary still asks Tatsuya if Takaki was the only one who used magic. Tatsuya then recalls that his teammates also activated their CADs to attack him, but ultimately decides to keep it to himself. Hours later, he and Miyuki meet up with the rest of the gang at a restaurant for dinner, and after going over everything that happened, they are shocked that Tatsuya was able to take down multiple seniors all by himself. Miyuki then uses that opportunity to yap about how amazing he is, but instead of just talking about it, she starts rubbing up against him. So Leo and the girls ask if they are actually siblings, so they can have them reported. After Miyuki decides to save the PDA for later, Leo asks Tatsuya how he actually stopped Takaki and the rest of his teammates from activating their CADs, because the only existing technology capable of such is only accessible to high-ranking military personnel. Tatsuya then explains that he developed a very similar technology, but tells them to keep it a secret because such information could crumble the state of their country if it fell into the wrong hands. The next day, Tatsuya resumes patrolling and gets called to stop a fight in the gymnasium. But on his way there, he notices a mysterious person trying to attack him and blocks their CAD activation right at the last second. After they escape, he notices something off about their uniform, but decides to keep it to himself. Much later, he meets up with Miyuki to talk, but Sayaka suddenly shows up and thanks him for the other day before asking if he has time to hang out. He then asks for a couple of minutes, so she tells him to meet her in the cafe and heads out. Miyuki then tells him to be careful about the way he handles his new position, because people will flock to him for all the wrong reasons if they ever discover the truth about his powers. After promising to be a lot more vigilant, Tatsuya heads over to the cafe and meets Sayaka, who then thanks him for his help again and says the other members of the disciplinary committee would have used what happened as an opportunity to score points from themselves. When she suddenly asks him to join the Kendo Club, he declines and asks why she is even trying to recruit him. So she reminds him that the academy solely bases its ranking and grades on students with strong aptitude for magic, which leaves reserve students like them literally breaking their backs mastering non-magic skills. Just a little bit of acknowledgement. She further explains how all the non-magic clubs decided to join forces to stand up against the current system. So he asks if they already have a plan for what might happen after they stand up to the school's regulatory body. In the council office the next day, Mary starts teasing him about the chat with Sayaka because rumors have apparently been spread about him, making her blush. Upon hearing this, Miyuki loses it and almost turns the entire office into an iceberg. But Tatsuya manages to calm her down before explaining the conversation they had. After listening, Mayumi admits that it's possible for some committee members to be abusing their powers, but says the main reason why students strongly believe it is because someone is manipulating them in secret. Just then, Tatsuya tells her that the manipulator might be working for Hange, an anti-magic organization committed to ending the use of magic in society. This surprises Mayumi since information on Hange is highly classified, so Tatsuya decides to leave it up to speculation. Much later, he enters the infirmary to meet Nurse Bubble Jugs, who then says she just wants to ask him a couple of questions for a student survey project. After minutes of talking, he gets up to leave, but she suddenly asks if Sayaka actually asked him out on a date. He then tells her to stop listening to rumors, but she further offers to help if he ever faces any issues with Sayaka. Later that night, he pulls up a file on Blanche to show Miyuki and tells her about the suspicious student because he had a wristband similar to members of Eaglite, a sub-organization working closely with Hange to infiltrate the academy. After further explaining that Blanche aims to completely stop the use of magic and essentially destabilize the nation's economy, he tells her not to worry too much about it because the 10 master clans will definitely make an effort to stop them. However, he also warns her that it might cause them both to get dragged back into the Yotsuba family. At the cafe days later, Tatsuya meets up with Sayaka to discuss her plan to take a stand against the discrimination of reserve students. And after she explains how unfair the school is, he reminds her that the school actually forbids any kind of discrimination among students. When she asks if he likes the current state of the academy, he admits that a lot of it is wrong, but further explains that it's mostly their fellow students who go against school rules to disrespect each other. After saying that he doesn't share her hatred for the school system, he returns to class only to hear that a bunch of discrimination activists have just taken over the broadcasting system. He immediately rushes over and finds the rest of the student council, who then explain that they locked themselves inside after cutting off the power supply and demanding fair treatment for every student regardless of their magic aptitude. After they all take turns discussing what to do, Tatsuya decides to ask Katsudo since he is the chairman of all clubs and extracurricular activities. Katsudo then decides to negotiate since they haven't committed a crime that deserves a violent response. Upon hearing this, Tatsuya calls Sayaka and guarantees her freedom if they open the door and agree to a negotiation. However, after she agrees and opens the door, they immediately arrest her, so she tries to attack Tatsuya. But Katsudo tells her not to worry because they are still going to have the negotiation. The next moment, Mayumi decides to set them free and asks Sayaka to follow her out so they can discuss the details of the negotiation. The next morning, Mayumi spots Tatsuya and Miyuki waiting for her, and after they ask about what happened with Sayaka, she explains how they all agreed to have a public debate about it in front of the entire school. Moments later, Tatsuya sees Mizuki having a heated conversation with Kino, so he rushes over to make sure she is okay. Hours later, he and Miyuki meet up with his ninjutsu coach, Yakumo, who then says he has already done some research on Kino because his family is shady. Turns out, Kino's older brother, Hajime, oversees all of Blanche's operations in Japan, which would explain why Kino was enrolled in the academy. While they continue discussing it, Sayaka and the rest of her wannabe felon friends receive special rings from Hajime for the debate. The next day, all the students gather in the event hall for the debate, and after a bunch of reserve students reps step up to talk about how incompetent and evil the current system is, Mayumi takes the stand and admits that discrimination is at an all-time high in the academy. However, she goes on to carefully explain her plan to bring a stop to it and ends up winning everyone's hearts. All of a sudden, explosions start going off right outside the hall, so Tatsuya and the others start detaining members of Sayaka's coalition. However, multiple groups of masked crooks suddenly open fire on several parts of the academy, so Tatsuya and Miyuki decide to go investigate the site of the last explosion. On getting there, they see that Leo and Erika have already started beating the brakes off the terrorists they could find, so they decide to team up to take down the others. However, Nurse Mega Melon suddenly shows up to tell them that the terrorists blowing stuff up are just diverting their attention from the main terror unit, who are currently in the library stealing data. She also tells them that Sayaka is one of them and asks Tatsuya to go easy on her because she has been confused about her place in life over the past year and just played into their hands. Tatsuya then tells her to save the sob story for someone who actually cares and runs ahead to reach the library, so Miyuki and the others follow along. On the way there, they encounter another group of terrorists, so Leo decides to put his dollar store Winter Soldier arm to good use. As he starts punching through multiple attacks, Erika gets a little worried and asks if his C.A.D. can actually keep up with so many attacks, but Tatsuya tells her not to worry about it. Moments later, they enter the library building, and after Tatsuya deduces where all the terrorists are hiding, Erika runs ahead to clear a path. Meanwhile, Sayaka, who is currently helping her unit steal data, starts second-guessing her decision to join the dark side. Right then, Miyuki uses her powers to blast open the door, and Tatsuya quickly destroys the storage cube they used to store all the stolen data. One of them immediately tries to shoot, but Miyuki turns him into a popsicle. So Tatsuya walks over to Sayaka and tells her that they were only using her because she had not developed enough brain matter to think for herself. Upon hearing this, Sayaka gets pissed and tells him to stop acting like he is above the discrimination weed students face in the academy. She further states that he should even have it worse because his younger sister is a prodigy recognized by every student in the academy, while he gets treated like sewage just for breathing the same air as them. Just then, Miyuki explains that she has never looked down on Tatsuya because of his lack of magic skill, because he is a lot more than a low-level magician. She goes on to tell Sayaka that the only reason she fell in with the bad crowd is that she never took the time to build confidence in her identity and skills. This causes Sayaka to start having second thoughts. But her terrorist buddies suddenly drop a smoke bomb, so she uses a jamming ring to stop Miyuki and Tatsuya from attacking. However, Tatsuya still takes them out, and after Miyuki realizes that Sayaka escaped, he tells her not to worry because Erika will definitely deal with her. Seconds later, Erika stops Sayaka from leaving and challenges her to a sword fight. Sayaka accepts, thinking her years of training give her an advantage, but Erika proceeds to deliver a humiliating beatdown that leaves the wannabe samurai at a loss for words. Meanwhile, Kino, who also tried to escape, gets captured by Kotaro and Midori. Much later, Sayaka wakes up in the infirmary and decides to tell everyone how her transition to the dark side started. Apparently, Kino had been recruiting members of the Kendo Club a while back, and since he claimed to be mainly fighting against student discrimination, she decided to support him. However, what reinforced her dedication to fighting the current school system was the day Mary refused to spar with her just because she was a reserve student. Upon hearing this, Mary claims she never judged Sayaka based on her status or magical abilities. She was actually just scared to go against the one girl who had dedicated her entire life to becoming a kendo master. This causes Sayaka to start bawling her eyes out as she realizes that all the hatred she felt was simply a misunderstanding. After Tatsuya lets her use his shirt as a napkin, he decides to go find the other Hange members who escaped, so Leo and the girls offer to follow him. But Miyuki asks if he has any idea how they can actually find them. Tatsuya then opens the door to reveal Nurse Mega Melons, who has been eavesdropping this entire time, after she explains where they can find the abandoned factory Hange uses as a hideout. Takaki asks Katsudo for permission to join them because he wants to take down the creep that made Sayaka lose her spark. On the way to the factory, minutes later, Tatsuya tells Leo and Erika to keep their escape route clear and capture any Hange member who tries to escape while Takaki and Katsudo handle the rear exit. On getting there, he and Miyuki dash into the facility, and he quickly uses his elemental sight skill to figure out where Hajime and his goons are. The moment they enter the room, Hajime tells Tatsuya to join them, but he refuses, so Hajime tries to use a hypnotic skill to take over his mind. Unfortunately, Tatsuya's brain cells are not as worthless as Sayaka's, so he resists, and Hajime decides to make a run for it since his only useful skill has now been rendered useless. After Tatsuya uses his silver horn to destroy the weapons his goons were using, Miyuki tells him to go stop Hajime and immediately starts turning the goons into human popsicles. Moments later, Tatsuya catches up to Hajime and tries to capture him again, but he gets surrounded by another unit of goons, all equipped with jamming devices to stop his CAD. However, Tatsuya easily recognizes the devices and names Hajime's sponsor, causing him to nearly piss himself in fear. After Tatsuya easily takes down his goons, Takaki slices the door open and asks who the low testosterone wimp is. As soon as Tatsuya mentions Hajime's name, Takaki charges in and chops his arm off for deceiving Sayaka. Thankfully, Katsudo steps up and uses a healing skill to stop the bleeding before the cops show up to arrest Hajime and his useless goons. The next day, Tatsuya pays a visit to Sayaka in the hospital, and she explains that they decided to keep her for a couple more days to make sure Hajime didn't tamper with any more of her memories with his hypnotic skill. After saying that Kino was also admitted, Tatsuya explains how the school decided not to take strict measures against the students involved, as it would question their credibility as the top magic academy in the nation. Days later, he returns with Miyuki and Erika to congratulate her on getting discharged, only to learn that Taikaki has been spending the last few days rizzing her up. They eventually decide to interrupt and congratulate Sayaka on getting her brain fixed. But then her dad pulls Tatsuya aside to thank him for saving her. When he refuses to take the credit, her dad tells Tatsuya that he already expected that response because the major, who happens to be an old friend, already told him what kind of person Tatsuya is. Tatsuya gets shocked and a little scared to hear this, but Sayaka's dad tells him not to worry and promises not to tell a soul who he really is. Shortly after this, they all head out and leave the lovebirds to spend more time together. Meanwhile, in the nation's third magic academy, a student named Masaki has just finished his daily training. So he heads to the bath while a friend named Shinkuru searches for him. In the bathroom, minutes later, Shinkuru explains what happened at the academy. But Masaki remains unfazed and says there is no way anyone got hurt because the First Academy students are basically assassins in uniforms. However, Shinkuru insists that none of them would be a match for Masaki, who is popularly known as the Crimson Prince. A couple of nights later, Miyuki starts a late training session with Master Yakumo. But then Tatsuya suddenly notices a presence lurking in the shadows. As he prepares to attack, Nurse Mega Melons comes out of hiding and apologizes for sneaking up on them. After Yakumo reveals that she was actually his student, Ono asks Miyuki if she will be taking part in the 9 schools tournament between the academy and the top-ranked magic schools across the country. Miyuki then says yes and further explains that she is participating in 2 of them, causing Ono to get impressed. However, Tatsuya remains obsessed with figuring out why Ono suddenly decided to show up in the first place, so Yakumo explains that she is an undercover cop and begs them to keep her secret. After agreeing to it, Tatsuya says that she has to share any information she gets about terror groups like Hange, so she also agrees. At school the next day, Tatsuya's class competes against another class in a game of magic soccer, and after they win, a guy named Mickey walks over to speak with them. When he starts talking about Erika and asks how they put up with her, they get the sense that he has some kind of relationship with her and try to ask about it, but then Erika shows up and claims that they are actually long-time friends. The next moment, they notice her shorts and ask why she is dressed like she works at Hooters. She then tries to defend her fashion choices, but Leo insists that she looks like a failed OnlyFans model, so she takes her anger out on his nutsack. During lunch, a couple of hours later, Mayumi tells them that the athletes representing the academy in the tournament have been selected, but also notes that they have a shortage of engineers smart enough to work on the CADS. Azusa then suggests adding Tatsuya to the team, but he immediately refuses, stating that the Bloom students on the team will definitely hate the idea of working with him. However, when Miyuki says that she won't join the team unless he is there, he agrees to it. Much later, Mayumi summons everyone on the team for a meeting, and as expected, most of them tell her to send Tatsuya away, even after she assures them that he is the best at analyzing CADS. To fix this, Katsudo offers to let Tatsuya run a little test with his CAD, but Mayumi decides to do it instead since she is the one who added him to the team. Eventually, they agree to let him work on Taikaki's CAD, but then haters start mocking Tatsuya because he decides to use a keyboard instead of a magic skill. Moments later, Taikaki tests out the CAD to prove how good Tatsuya is, and while they all still decide to hate on him, one guy named Kei acknowledges Tatsuya's skill. Eventually, though, after Hanzo also admits that Tatsuya is a genius, most of them agree to work with him. Later that night, Mayor Kazama calls Tatsuya, who as it turns out, is actually a top-ranked military officer. After telling him that a device called the Third Eye has been completed, Kazama asks him to come down to the base to work on it. He then warns Tatsuya about the upcoming tournament because he and Sayaka's dad did a little digging and discovered that an international crime syndicate called the No Heads Dragon has people targeting the tournament. Early the next day, Tatsuya and Miyuki visit the FLT Development Center and receive a royal welcome from everyone before the chief of the facility tells Tatsuya not to act so formally since he was once their boss, the renowned and world-famous Taurus Silver. Tatsuya then shows him a prototype for a flying device he just developed, so the chief orders some of the lab workers to run a test on it. After, Tatsuya thanks them for helping with the tests, but on the way out, he and Miyuki run into their father and Disney adaptation of Alfred, whom they usually call Mr. Aoki. Aoki then greets Miyuki, but completely ignores Tatsuya, and when she asks why, he explains how insulting it would be to greet a glorified bodyguard like Tatsuya. Upon hearing this, Miyuki loses it and tries to turn the old geezer into a block of ice. But Tatsuya stops her from channeling her inner Sub-Zero and reminds Aoki that his mum was the former head of the Yotsuba clan, which means he is indirectly insulting her. Just then, their father, who had been mute this entire time, tells Tatsuya not to bring up his mother like that. But Tatsuya causally leads Miyuki out and says that he isn't the one who disrespected her in the first place. At school, a couple of hours later, Tatsuya and the rest of the athletes get presented to the student body before Miyuki pins their badges. Afterwards, Tatsuya meets up with the female first-year athletes to discuss their training regimen and his role in the team. Several days before the tournament, Mizuki decides to watch Tatsuya's training session with the athletes, but she suddenly senses a powerful magic signature and takes off her glasses to see the source. After realizing that it's Mickey, she gets closer, but he gets spooked and loses control of the spirits he summoned. Luckily, Tatsuya swoops in and uses the opportunity to aura farm before asking Mickey if he was using ancient magic. After he says yes, Tatsuya asks Mizuko for a description of the spirits, and after she explains it, Mickey walks closer to her and says she possesses crystal eyes, meaning she is one of a handful of magic users who can see the true nature of spirits. This causes Tatsuya to realize that she is a lot more valuable than he earlier expected, but they both agree to keep it a secret so she won't be forced to use her abilities for selfish reasons. Days later, all the chosen athletes head to the tournament venue in a bus, but on the way there, a random driver suddenly loses control as one of his tires explodes. As his car tumbles toward the bus, everyone starts activating their C&D to stop it. Mary and Mayumi immediately tell them to stop because activating their C&DS at the same time will only cause a jamming effect on everyone. Mary then asks Katsudo to slow the car down, while Miyuki decides to put out the fire. The moment she puts the flames out, Katsudo creates a barrier to stop the car from hitting the bus. Minutes later, the police arrive to inspect the scene and permit them to head to their hotel. As they get off the bus, Hanzo tells Takaki that he feels bad about being completely useless. Takaki then tells him that not every situation requires action, but Hanzo insists that he could have done something to help instead of sitting back like a nutless wimp, letting Miyuki handle everything. Upon hearing this, Takaki tells him not to beat himself up because the Shiba siblings are not your average students. Meanwhile, Tatsuya and Miyuki, who have no idea that they have become the main topic again, discuss what actually happened with the accident. Tatsuya tells her that the driver had actually used 3 high-level spells designed to conceal the presence of Sion after it had been cast, because the collision was rigged to look like an accident. This causes Miyuki to feel concerned for his safety since she can also channel her inner Elsa and remain safe. While Tatsuya's mega mind might be limited in split-second situations, when they step into the hotel lobby minutes later, Miyuki spots Erika and stops to talk to her. Tatsuya then decides to leave them alone since he has a meeting with the other engineers, and as soon as he leaves, Mizuki also shows up. During the welcome feast, hours later, 2 girls named Hanoka and Shizuku approach Miyuki to tell her that the other athletes want to hang out. They further explain that they didn't say anything earlier because she has been stuck to Tatsuya like Gorilla Glue. Just then, Kanon and Kei also show up and call them stupid for avoiding Tatsuya, after Kei points out that their reason for avoiding him is just to preserve their worthless pride as Bloom students. Tatsuya suggests that Miyuki go chat with the other students. Miyuki eventually agrees, and while she practically forces her to talk with the other girls, Masaki becomes obsessed and loses his senses to her beauty. Shinkuru then reveals everything he knows about Miyuki to help his love-starved friend feel a little better. Much later, a speaker calls their attention to the stage and introduces the chairman of the Magic Association. But a simple-looking lady takes the stage, which surprises Tatsuya since he can sense the chairman who is concealing his presence behind the lady. After finally revealing himself, he gives Tatsuya a nod before telling them that only 5 people sensed his presence before he revealed himself. He then proceeds to give a speech about how beneficial it would be if they all did the extra work to improve their skills. Later that night, Mickey tries to practice his summoning magic, but suddenly notices some suspicious people lurking about. After taking a moment to gather his nuts, he rushes towards them and tosses 3 low-budget Bakugan cards at them. They notice this and try to send him up to heaven, but their weapons suddenly break apart. The next moment, Mickey's cards hit them with some powerful currents, but after they pass out, he tries to figure out who disarmed them. Suddenly, Tatsuya walks out feeling like the big bad wolf from Disney Jr. and says he also noticed something suspicious on his way inside a couple of minutes ago. He then checks on the intruders and commends Mickey for taking them out without causing any major damage. However, Mickey refuses to believe that he deserves all the praise because he would have become Swiss cheese if Tatsuya hadn't disarmed the goons at the last moment. Tatsuya then tells him to give himself some credit because it takes a lot of courage for a usually shy coward like him to make the first move. He further gives Mickey some advice on how to make his spells work better before telling him to inform security about the intruders. The next day, the competition finally starts with the first event being the women's battle board qualifiers, which Mary takes part in. As soon as the match begins, one of the contestants tries to slow the others down by splashing water, but Mary, who happens to be a retired hippie, easily surfs the waves. As she continues, Tatsuya notes that she is using magic to keep herself stable on the board while also activating up to 4 spells at once. While he explains her strategy to the others, she crosses the finish line, securing the first win for the academy. After, Tatsuya meets up with Kazama and a bunch of high-ranking officers to discuss the intruders he and Mickey stopped the previous night. Kazama confirms that the men are part of the No Heads Dragon Syndicate he called about the other night, and says they have yet to uncover their reasons for being in the area. However, they advise him to continue being careful, as they suspect the syndicate is still targeting the tournament. Hours later, Tatsuya joins everyone else at the arena to watch Mayumi participate in a speed shooting event, and as expected, she easily defeats her opponents to secure the Academy's second win. After another day of taking multiple wins in the female contests, Tatsuya, Kanan, Kei, and Shizuku head to the engineering tent, where Suzune informs them that their chances of emerging overall best are very slim because they mostly lose the male events. Hours later, Tatsuya heads back to his room with a package from the FLT chief, but then Miyuki and the rest of the gang show up to spend time with him. Erika quickly notices the package and, after opening it, she asks if it is a new type of CAD. Tatsuya says it is, and then tosses it to Leo so he can take it for a spin. Minutes later, they arrive in a training room behind the hotel. But after Leo activates the new CAD, it detaches, so Tatsuya explains how it can still function as a sword despite being detached. Leo then proceeds to destroy a bunch of innocent test dummies. The next day, the tournament continues with the women's battle board event. However, unlike what happened the last time, a contestant over-accelerates and crashes into Mary, causing her to lose control of her board and crash into the sidewalk. Luckily, the doctors manage to fix any major injuries, but Maru ends up getting benched from the next contest because she needs a minimum of 10 days to recover. Mary then asks about the contestant who crashed into her, so Mayumi explains that she only suffered minor injuries. However, she also tells Mary that they suspect foul play because someone must have used magic to make her lose balance. This causes Mary to recall that the water seemed to suddenly change direction just before she fell off the board. Mayumi then tells her not to bother looking into it because Tatsuya already got his hands on some of the footage. Much later, Tatsuya finishes reviewing the video in his hotel room and tells everyone that the whole thing was a plan to make sure Mary got knocked off her board. He then pulls up a simulation of the course and shows them where the accident occurred before explaining that all the contestants know they are to slow down when they approach that curve. But for some reason, the girl decides to hit the gas, which likely means that her CAD was hacked to make it speed up instead of decelerating. When they all ask who could have done such a thing, Tatsuya responds that it had to be one of the staff. But Miyuki refuses to believe it because each school has its CADs carefully locked away at all times. Tatsuya still insists that it had to be a staff member because, at some point during the tournament, all CADs are handed over to the tournament staff for safekeeping. Later that night, they both get called for a meeting where Miyuki gets told to replace Mary in the Mirage Bat contest. Miyuki initially refuses, saying she isn't fit to take Mary's place. But Mary assures her that she is skilled enough to make it work. During the rookie speed shooting match the following day, Shizuku uses the entire arena as her magic activation zone thanks to her CAD, which allows her to shoot targets with precision. Upon seeing this, Mayumi and the others freeze in shock as they didn't expect Tatsuya's engineering skills to be that good. Days later, Tatsuya meets up with Shizuku to run a quick check on his CAD again, and she promises to make sure everyone acknowledges his skill by winning again. Just a few minutes later, she turns her opponents into floor paint, so Mayumi glazes Tatsuya for using his Mega Mind to update Shizuku's CAD. However, he refuses to take any credit for basically handing them the victory. So Suzune informs them that the Magic University board already plans to adopt Shizuku's finishing move as part of their index. Despite this, Tatsuya refuses to take credit for his work and tells them not to mention his name as the developer. Meanwhile, Masaki's teammates meet up to discuss their not-so-surprising failures so far. After Masaki notes that the First Academy is only winning because of the mysterious engineer working on their CADs, they decide to figure out who he is. Later on, Hanoka begs Tatsuya to work his magic on her CAD for a battle event, but he refuses since it would be undermining Azusa's work. However, he offers to help with her strategy instead. Thanks to this, she actually manages to secure the win, and as soon as she crosses the line, she runs to Tatsuya and thanks him while bawling her eyes out because she has never actually won a match. Around the same time, leaders of the No-Head Dragon Syndicate meet up to discuss the tournament and agree that they need to find a way to make sure Masaki's school wins the tournament. To make this happen, they decide to get a little more serious about sabotaging every student from the First Academy. The next day, Shizuku takes part in the Rookie Pillar Break event and easily defeats her opponent again thanks to Tatsuya's help. Afterwards, Miyuki also enters the arena for her Pillar Break match and steals another victory for the First Academy. During a late-night feast hours later, Tatsuya gets surrounded by a group of adoring fans who continue glazing and yapping about how amazing he is despite his efforts to avoid their acknowledgement. Upon seeing all this, Shun gets furious and storms out, so his friends go after him to ask why he is upset. He then makes them promise to win the Monolith Code match without Tatsuya's help just to prove that Bloom students are better than worthless weeds like him. The next day, Tatsuya and Miyuki run into Masaki and Shinkaru on their way to the arena, and Tatsuya immediately asks if they have something to say since they are blocking his path. Shinkaru then admits that they were just curious to meet the genius engineer behind most of the First Academy's victories. After Miyuki leaves to prepare for her match, Tatsuya notices Masaki's creepy eyes glossing over to catch a glimpse of her beauty, so he tells them to focus on their upcoming matches. Before leaving, though, Shinkaru tells Tatsuya that they will be participating in the Monolith Code match, so Tatsuya wishes them luck and says he won't be. Much later, Tatsuya ends up in his room, recalling how Masaki joined the army 3 years ago and used a rupture magic skill to brutalize Soviet Union invaders. While he became famously addressed as the Crimson Prince because of this, Shinkaru became a new generation prodigy, and his supercomputer brain led him to identify one of the cardinal codes, which was initially thought to only exist in theory. Upon realizing that both of them are the perfect combination, Tatsuya gets worried about Shun and his fellow hot-headed dimwits, who will be going up against them in the Monolith Code match. The following day, Tatsuya arrives in the engineering tent only to learn that Shun's team was buried after an old building fell apart during the match. After explaining how it all happened, Shizuku refuses to believe that it was just an accident, but Mayumi tells her not to make speculations as they don't have proof to back up her claims. Tatsuya then asks how the team is doing, and after telling him that they are already receiving treatment at the hospital, Mayumi takes Tatsuya aside and asks if their school's team is being targeted on purpose. After giving it some thought, Tatsuya decides to tell her all about the No-Head Dragons syndicate and the moves they are making in the tournament. But this causes Mayumi to realize that Tatsuya is involved in something dangerous, so she advises him to be careful. Meanwhile, the No-Head Dragons leaders start another meeting and get excited to announce the success of their latest plot before saying that the First Academy will have no choice but to pull out of the tournament. During the Rookie Mirage battle match the next day, Azusa overhears some of the engineers from other schools, saying that the CAD sequence the First Academy athletes use is similar to that of the legendary Taurus Silver. Her usually dormant brain cells immediately connect the dots, leaving her frozen in shock as she realizes that the Taurus Silver has been in front of her this entire time. Later on, Tatsuya gets called for a meeting by Mayumi, who then asks if he can participate in the Rookie Monolith Code match now that they don't have a team anymore. Tatsuya immediately refuses, saying that the other athletes wouldn't be happy if a reserve student represented them. However, Katsudo tells him to stop using the excuse of being a reserve student to back out of the match, when they all know he is strong enough to win. This causes Tatsuya to change his mind, but he only agrees on the condition that Leo and Miki will be his teammates. Several hours later, Tatsuya informs the boys of their new roles and assures them that they will be fine since he will be the one to fine-tune their CADS. He also gives them a crash course on how the game is played and comes up with the formation to ensure they win. The next day, the new team participates in their first match, so Tatsuya decides to show off some of his abilities. He charges towards the opposing team's monolith guns and easily immobilizes his opponent before disarming him and unlocking their monolith. However, instead of typing in the codes, he starts looking for other opponents, because there is only so much the Great Taurus Silver can handle while in an active battle. Meanwhile, Leo has just taken out the boy who tried to sneak up on him and unlock the monolith. At the same time, Miki releases some Sion waves that leave the last opponent feeling dizzy and disoriented, giving Tatsuya an opening which he then uses to knock him out. After the match, everyone starts cheering for Tatsuya's flawless victory, so Masaki takes the opportunity to ask Shinkoru if he found anything good. Shinkoru then says that Tatsuya has good combat skills but still struggles with basic magic, which means they actually have an advantage over him. He further assures Masaki that they will win as long as they avoid all of Tatsuya's traps in the arena. Days later, Nurse Mega Melons delivers a package to Tatsuya from Master Yakumo, but before she leaves, Tatsuya asks her to find out where the No-Head Dragon's base is located. The following day, Tatsuya gives Leo and Miki robes infused with magic circles to increase the effect of their skills during the match. After he explains how they can use it against Masaki, Mayumi gets worried and asks Tatsuya if he can actually handle the Crimson Prince. Hanzo also asks if he has some special strategy in place, so Tatsuya reminds them that Masaki has an obsession with him and says he plans to force him into a close combat situation. Upon hearing this, Taikaki tells him that the use of physical force is prohibited, but Tatsuya assures them that his plan will work. Minutes later, they all enter the arena for the match, and while Leo gets embarrassed by the robes and asks Tatsuya why he couldn't design something less humiliating, Masaki tells Shinkoru not to worry about anything because his bullets can penetrate anything. Just then, the chairman of the Magic Association joins the other officials in the viewing box, and when they ask why, he tells them that one of the students has piqued his interest. The next moment, the buzzer goes off, so Masaki and Tatsuya immediately start unleashing spells in an attempt to defeat each other. Despite this, they both end up evenly matched and continue unleashing spell after spell until one of Masaki's spells gets close enough to cause serious damage. Tatsuya immediately pulls back and uses his observation skill to detect where Masaki's spells will appear. Shinkiru then makes a play for the monolith Leo and Miki are guarding, but when he tries to use his invisible bullet, Leo blocks his line of sight with the robe, which transforms into a shield. Mickey then attacks him with another spell, so Shinkuru quickly jumps out of the way to avoid it. The next moment, Mickey uses his cloning jutsu to confuse Shinkuru, giving Leo an opening to attack. But before he can land a hit, Masaki shoots him. Mickey tries to retaliate, but Shinkuru activates a gravity skill to pin him to the ground. So Masaki decides to focus on Tatsuya again and immediately fires a spell to slow him down. But he accidentally gives it too much juice and gets terrified when Tatsuya gets struck down. However, Tatsuya had already activated a restoration skill beforehand, so he waits for his body to recover before getting closer to Masaki and unleashing a powerful skill that almost implodes the arena. Inside the control center, Mayumi demands to know how on earth Tatsuya survived Masaki's blast. So Katsudo explains that Tatsuya's mastery of ninjutsu definitely gives him a supernatural ability to withstand powerful spells. Meanwhile, Shinkuru panics as he realizes that Masaki actually got defeated, but he still manages to block an attack from Mickey. However, the spell ends up being a little too strong, so he tries to escape and meets the same fate as Masaki. The final member of their team then decides to redeem their school's honor. But Leo blocks his attack and quickly puts his brain in snooze mode, securing yet another win for the First Academy. Before long, the higher-ups of No Head Dragon learn about Masaki's humiliating defeat and decide to force the First Academy's athletes to drop out of the Mirage Bat game. On the day of the match, one of the athletes suddenly loses control of the C-A-D and crashes. As the medical team rushes her away, Mizuki calls Tatsuya to tell him that she noticed a sudden glitch before the crash. After hanging up, Tatsuya tells Miyuki to get ready for her match, but then he collects her C-A-D and takes it to the tournament staff for a routine check. The next moment, he notices that he just installed something suspicious and immediately grabs him to figure out what it was. The chairman hears all this commotion and rushes over to ask what happened. So Tatsuya explains his suspicions. The chairman then takes a close look at the C-A-D before saying that it has been injected with a program called Golden Electron Silkworm. He further explains that the program has a delayed activation sequence, which causes C-A-DS to malfunction and orders the staff to be arrested. Hours later, Tatsuya watches with pride as Miyuki dominates the game and comes out on top by the end of both the first and second rounds. Soon after this, the No-Heads higher-ups learn that their plan to sabotage the game failed again, and after completely losing it, they agree that the only solution is to get the tournament cancelled. To ensure this plan succeeds, they deploy genetically modified humans called generators to the arena. However, when the dollar store cyborgs try to attack, special military operatives swoop in and take them down. The next day, Miyuki participates in the Mirage Bat finals and gets surprised when athletes from other academies start using her flying spell sequence. Upon seeing this, Tatsuya tells Mayumi that the committee made him submit Miyuki's C-A-D for review after what happened yesterday. He further tells her that they likely leaked the flying spell sequence to give other students an advantage, but says he isn't worried since Miyuki has mastered it. As expected, Miyuki outlasts the other athletes and secures yet another victory. While they all celebrate later that night, Tatsuya meets up with Ono, who then gives him the coordinates to the No-Heads Dragon base along with a list of all the top members. After she leaves, he enters another car with Kaioyuko and gives her directions to the hideout. Meanwhile, the chairman of the Magic Committee has just met up with Kazama to talk about Tatsuya because he feels they are wasting his talents on worthless events like the tournament. He further suggests building an alliance between Tatsuya and Masaki and says they would both become an unstoppable force crucial to the growth of the nation's magic sector. After giving it some thought, Kazama tells him that Tatsai's talents are being used in the best way possible, and also claims Masaki is a rookie compared to the legendary Taurus Silver. However, he realizes that the chairman is just worried about Tatsuya's loyalty since he is connected to the Yotsuba clan, so Kazama assures him that Tatsuya would never betray the military. By then, the leaders of the No-Heads Dragon Syndicate have just learned that Tatsuya is the reason for their consecutive failures. But since they have no idea what he looks like, they get confused about what to do next. Just then, one of their bodyguards gets shot down by Tatsuya, who is actually in a separate building far from them. After all the lights in the room suddenly go out, Tatsuya gives them a call and says he is going to take revenge for everything they did to his teammates. The next moment, he shoots another guard, so they all scramble for cover and ask the generators to locate Tatsuya. After they point out his location, a half-human hippo tries to shoot and ends up with a bullet in the eye. He then orders the generators to go after Tatsuya, but they tell him that they can't, causing them all to realize that Tatsuya has also blocked all communications in and out of the room, hoping he will spare them. One of the men promises Tatsuya that he will speak to their boss and convince him to take their organization out of Japan forever. Tatsuya then asks for their boss's name, and after the man explains that their boss is known as Sun Gongming to the public, Tatsuya thanks him before sending all of them to the Lord. The next day, Tatsuya meets up with Kazama and the officers who defeated the generators that showed up in the arena to ask why the syndicate is considered high risk. They then tell him that the syndicate is also a sorcery booster supplier and explain that the boosters are magic amplifying devices made from the brains of unalived magicians. Around the same time, Katsudo meets with Mayumi in the conference room before his monolith battle match, and she tells him that the 10 master clans feel threatened by Tatsuya's power. As a representative of the clans, she claims to be okay with Tatsuya since he has proven himself to be a good guy, but she also wishes he had the blood of one of the clans, so they wouldn't try to attack him. Katsudo then tells her not to worry and promises to protect Tatsuya if it ever comes down to it. After their conversation, he proceeds to dominate his match and reinstates the First Academy as the overall best magic institution in the country. After the award ceremony, the athletes attend the final feast, and as they all celebrate, Tatsuya spots Masaki speaking with Miyuki and immediately walks up to interrupt. This causes Masaki to ask if they are related, and after Tatsuya says yes, he starts feeling a little better because he initially thought they were a couple. After laughing at him, Tatsuya tells Miyuki to dance with him, and while they do so, Hanoko walks over to Tatsuya, hoping he will see the green light and ask her for a dance. Unfortunately, having a brain that only understands binary code stops him from getting the message until Erika tells him. Eventually, he ends up dancing with a few other girls from their team as well, and when he finally decides to take a break from the ladies, Katsudo asks to speak with him. In the garden moments later, Katsudo asks Tatsuya if he is part of the 10 master clans, and when he denies it, Katsudo suggests joining by marrying Mayumi. Tatsuya immediately says he is far too young to be thinking about marriage, but Katsudo tells him to think it through before making a decision. He further reminds Tatsuya that he defeated Masaki, who is the next head of the 10 master clans, and says there is no way they will let him walk freely after that. After Katsudo leaves, Miyuki shows up to ask what they were talking about, but Tatsuya claims it was nothing important, so she asks him for a dance. A couple of nights later, officers Chiba and Inagaki rush to the pier to intercept a ship transporting wanted criminals, but after using their Sia DS to fight the armed goons stationed at the docks, they blast their way into the ship, only to see that their targets have already escaped. Shortly after this, two men named Lu and Chen make it inside a secret facility, and thank a fembot named Gongjin for his help before walking inside. At the academy the following day, Miyuki finds Tatsuya in the study fully immersed in some research, so she asks if it's something important. He then reminds her how long it took just to master the flying sequence he installed during the match, and says he has been looking for a way to store sequences, so they won't have to worry about activating multiple complicated spells during intense battles. After explaining how the Philosopher's Stone could easily solve it, Tatsuya asks Miyuki why she even came to find him in the first place, so she tells him that Suzune wants to have a meeting with him. Several minutes later, Tatsuya meets up with Suzune and Kazuo, who then explain that there is an upcoming thesis contest between the magic academies. Kazuo then asks if he would join the school's team, but as usual, Tatsuya asks why they want him to do it when there are other students who have likely been training just for the contest. Suzune then explains that they just don't have the brain processing power to meet up with the level of research Tatsuya conducts on his own. Upon seeing that her sweet words are not working, she tells Tatsuya that they are actually basing the thesis on his recent research, so he agrees to do it since it could help him get more information faster. Hours later, Tetsuya and Miyuki meet up with the rest of the gang for a late afternoon meal. And after he tells them about the meeting with Suzyun, Miki tells him to take it seriously because winning the thesis means his research will be recognized by the National Committee and entered into the Magic Index. Tetsuya then says he already agreed to it since the thesis is connected to his research on storing magic sequences, so they wish him luck. Much later, he and Miyuki return home and meet a heavy hottie named Sayuri. Miyuki immediately offers to get started on dinner and promises to wear whatever he wants while making it. But Tetsuya tells her to relax and wear whatever she wants. He then takes a seat with Sayuri and asks what she wants. But she starts by asking if they both still hate her guts. After reminding her that their dad remarried only 6 months after their mum passed, he tells her not to expect any hospitality from Miyuki before once again asking for the real reason she showed up. She then shows him an extremely rare relic and asks him to drop out of school and come continue his research in the lab. After agreeing that the relic is really valuable, Tetsuya refuses to drop out and explains that he is the only one capable of guaranteeing Miyuki's safety. He then suggests taking the gem to one of the subordinate labs and having the scientists there look at it. But this causes Sayuri to get pissed, so she snatches the box up and storms out. Tetsuya then tells Miyuki to lock up and stay inside so he can go make sure Sayuri's hot head doesn't get her into any trouble. Moments later, he hops on a bike and starts chasing her on the highway, but she suddenly gets intercepted by a suspicious van. The next moment, 2 goons hop out and try to send her up to heaven, but Tetsuya jams their CADs and knocks them both out. However, as he tries to check on Sayuri, a sniper shoots a bullet right through his chest. But Tetsuya quickly uses restoration magic to heal himself before figuring out the sniper's location. After taking him out as well, he returns home and explains everything to Kazama, who then promises to do a little digging to figure out who hired the sniper. Minutes later, Miyuki serves him some tea and takes the opportunity to show off her dress before asking about his conversation with Sayuri. Tetsuya then pulls out the box and shows her the relic before explaining that it could be the key to figuring out how to store magical sequences. However, he further explains that Sayuri wanted him to find a way to duplicate it so soldiers without magic could easily activate spells with specialized gear. While they continue talking about it, Chen assembles a team of hackers in a secret hideout to infiltrate the Magicians Association. And after learning that the attempt to retrieve the relic failed, he tells Liu to get it, no matter what he needs to do. Several nights later, Tetsuya ends up in a fierce cyber battle as a hacker tries to steal valuable files from his systems. He eventually manages to block the hacker, but at school the next day, he rushes over to Ono's office to ask for help tracking them down. After she explains that such a task is too much for even her, he asks if she knows anything about the organization that has been trading classified magic documents recently, but she refuses to go into detail, so he heads over to the council office to talk with Kei. Much later, Tetsuya walks out of a store and suddenly notices that someone has been stalking, so he tells Kanon and Kei, as Kanon immediately starts chasing the students. She drops a stun grenade to escape, but then Kanon deploys her CAD. Just then, Tetsuya jams it to give Kei an opening to hold the girl's bike in place with his gravity skill, but she fires up the rocket engines and manages to escape. After she eventually gets picked up in a dark van, Chen asks his hackers for details on their progress with the relic, so they tell him about Tetsuya and Miyuki, since they are the only ones related to Sayuri who could have seen the relic. He then decides to add the academy to their list of targets and tells Liu to get rid of any other suspicious people who might get in the way of their mission. At school the next day, Mizuki tells Tetsuya and the others that she noticed a suspicious presence following them around. And Miki also explains how the spirits around the academy all seem to be upset over something. Hours later, they meet up in a cafe for lunch. And while Kyoko strikes up a conversation with China and Inagaki, Erika and Leo suddenly come up with excuses to step outside. As soon as they step out of the cafe, Erika tells the stalker to stop hiding. A man named Jiru then walks out and immediately gets surrounded by both of them. After Leo tells him that Miki already put up a barrier to stop him from escaping, he suddenly starts attacking them and almost sends Leo to the ER. but they still manage to pin him down and demand to know what he wants. Jiru then promises to comply and says he isn't even the enemy, so Leo releases him and asks why he has been watching them. After saying that he is an agent from the West, Jiru explains that several organizations from the East have been targeting the Academy to steal valuable magic intel, which could give them enough military power to become a real threat. He further states that his mission is simply to make sure none of that intel gets leaked before suddenly pulling out a gun and telling them to get rid of the barrier. Left with no other option, they tell Mickey to drop it. So Jiru warns them to be careful even on school grounds before dropping a smoke bomb and escaping. Just then, Kaioyuko notices what just happened, so she returns to her car to scrub the security footage. Meanwhile, Jiru suddenly stops in an alley because someone has been following him as well. The next moment, Lu walks up and casually snaps his arm before ripping through his chest and setting his body on fire. Days later, Tatsuya manages to get a plasma device up and running with help from Suzune. But while everyone watches in awe, Sayaka spots Chiaki and immediately chases after her. Minutes later, Chiaki stops running and decides to face him. So Sayaka asks about the password-breaking device in her hand before saying that she already knows what it feels like to work for a spy organization. She then tells Chiaki to stop working for them for her own safety. But Chiaki says she has already accepted the risks. Sayaka then decides to capture her, but she fires off a canister of tear gas to hold them back. The next moment, Leo charges in and slams her into the ground before realizing that he used a little too much energy. A couple of minutes after this, they take her to the infirmary, and after Kanon asks Nurse Bubble Melons, Asuka, to watch over her, they head back to the plasma orb. Just then, Kanon sees Sekimoto yelling at Erika and Leo, so she asks Tatsuya, who then explains that Sekimoto apparently has a problem with them hanging around instead of patrolling. After she convinces Erika and Leo to take a break, Sekimoto suddenly tries to get a hold of the orb's data, but Suzune turns it off and asks why he is suddenly so interested in it. Meanwhile, Kanon and Kei have just returned to the infirmary, and after helping Asuka carry Chiaki back to the bed, they ask what she was doing at the orb. Chiaki then admits that she wanted to overwrite the program to make Tatsuya pay for what he did to her sister. Upon hearing this, they realize that she is talking about Koharu and explain that they are all responsible. But Chiaki insists that Tatsuya could have done something with his abilities. As they continue talking to her, Erika, who is currently in a car with Leo, tells him that they have to work on perfecting his trump card because there is obviously a much more dangerous scheme behind Chiaki's actions. During lunch the next day, the girls notice that they both skipped school and start spinning rumors about all the freaky things they could be up to. But Tatsuya tells them that Leo is most likely receiving the beating of his life. Around the same time, Leo tries to walk into the bath at Erika's dojo and ends up seeing more plot than his virgin eyes can handle. So she attacks him before they both spend the rest of the day perfecting his trump card. Meanwhile, Kotatsu starts training Mickey and a bunch of other students to handle security during the thesis competition. Days later, Tatsuya and Miyuki pay a visit to Master Yakumo to discuss the relic, and after he tells them to keep it safe at all times, Tatsuya decides to take it FLT. However, on the way there, a couple of hours later, he notices that a familiar has been trailing them and decides to speed up since using his powers in the open might attract unwanted attention. Once at FLT Lab, they see everyone obsessively working to stop a bunch of hackers from getting into the system. After they manage to put up an impenetrable firewall, Tatsuya neutralizes the familiar, so Chen decides to stop targeting FLT because there is no way Tatsuya would leave the relic there. He then tells Lu to go deal with Chiaki before Gongjin reaches the hospital, so they won't have to worry about valuable intel being leaked out. Much later, Tatsuya returns to school with Miyuki and decides to go do some work in the robotics lab. So Miyuki heads inside to wait for him. On getting inside, he meets Pixie, a generator tasked with securing the lab, and after getting verification, he enters the operations chamber to start working. However, he suddenly gets a whiff of sleeping gas and immediately tells Pixie to turn on the ventilation system. Several minutes later, Sekimoto enters the lab and tries to steal all the data. But Kenon turns the lights on and explains that Tetsuya was only pretending to catch him. Sekimoto then tries to fight his way out, but they easily knock him out. Early the next day, Mary arrives at the hospital where they admitted Chiaki with her crush Chiba. And as she tries to explain what happened to him, Gongjin spots Lu heading to Chiaki's room and slams the alarm. Chiba immediately rushes to stop him and manages to hold him back despite getting severely injured. Thankfully, Mary shows up on time to support him, so Lu jumps off the edge and slides down the chandelier before running off. Later that night, Chen tells him to focus on taking Sekimoto out instead, since he is more likely to spill the beans about their operation. However, when he shows up at the hospital the next day, he runs into Mary, Tatsuya, and Meru. He then charges in, thinking he can take them all at once. But Tatsuya quickly fixes his delusion by imploding his insides before Mary dislocates both his shoulders. Later that night, Tatsuya gives Kyoyuko a call to explain the current situation, and after they talk about it, he decides to take a nap on the sofa. However, Miyuki suddenly gets the bright idea to steal a kiss from him, but he wakes up at the last moment, so she runs off to hide in her room. Tatsuya then walks in a couple of minutes later and apologizes for making her worry about him, instead of threatening to call the cops. A couple of nights later, Chen meets up with Gongjin to thank him for everything he has assisted the organization with so far. After Gongjin tells him not to worry about it, Chen asks for help getting Lu out of custody, and Gongjin easily agrees to it. However, he then tells Chen to keep his operation out of Chinatown. So Chen takes a moment to think and says he can't make a full promise because the Kanto branch of the Magic Association, as well as the convention center to be used for the thesis competition, are both close to Chinatown. At the academy the following day, Tatsuya and the rest of the gang discuss transportation and protection since the thesis competition is scheduled to start tomorrow. Around the same time, Suzune shows up at the hospital with Hanzo to see Chiaki, who is still pissed over the fact that she couldn't stick it to Tatsuya. Suzune then tells her to stop expecting some sort of acknowledgement or apology from Tatsuya because he is way too proud to give a nobody like her some attention. She further reminds Chiaki that he was the overall best student in the entrance exams before also revealing that Chiaki came in second place. This surprises Chiaki, but the real shock sets in when Suzune tells her that she can actually surpass Tatsuya with time because he has always struggled with hardware, while she mostly prefers it. After wishing her a speedy recovery and telling her to try and make it to the convention, she heads out with Hanzo and admits that she only said all those things so Chiaki could channel her hatred into something meaningful. Later that night, Kyoyuko goes on a date with Chiba, and after melting his brain with some sweet talk, she asks him to come to the convention with a small unit of officers just in case something happens. The next day, students from all the magic academies begin trooping into the convention center, and before long, Tatsuya and Miyuki run into Masaki, who immediately reverts to simp status the moment she says hi to him. While they all continue making preparations for the competition, Kyoko learns about Luz and immediately starts contacting military officials to request extra protection for the convention center. A couple of hours later, Suzune and Kei take the stage for the very first presentation, and in just a couple of minutes, she leaves the crowd stunned with their groundbreaking research into new ways to synthesize magic technology. After the presentation, Shinkaru finds Tatsuya in the back room and commends him on being able to figure out the complex reactions and sequences necessary to bring the project to life. Tatsuya is also impressed by the fact that he can easily read all the data, but as they take turns glazing each other, a crazy explosion suddenly rocks the center. At that moment, Chiba rushes to his car and calls Inagaki to get an update on the situation. And after learning that they still don't even know how many attackers or organizations are involved, he calls his dad to ask for additional support. Meanwhile, Miyuki, who also got shocked by the explosion, runs to Tatsuya to ask if he knows where it came from. But as he takes a moment to think, a bunch of terrorists run in with anti-magic guns and stop them from deploying their CAD. However, after one of them notices that Tatsuya has refused to comply, he shoots, but Tatsuya casually grabs the bullet and reduces it to dust. After catching a couple more bullets, he calmly chops the man's arm off and remains unfazed while Miyuki cleans the blood off his uniform. Upon seeing this, the rest of the students find the balls again and overpower the terrorists while Tatsuya and the others discuss the next course of action. After agreeing that they have to deal with any other terrorists in the facility, Tatsuya tries to lead them out. But Shinkiro stops him and demands to know how he used such a powerful skill to catch multiple supersonic bullets. To avoid more attention, Tatsuya tells him that he doesn't have time for a meaningless debate and storms out. Moments later, Mayumi realizes that everyone else is still scared, so she tells Azusa to make them relax since she will be taking over as the new council president. Azusa then proceeds to use a powerful calming skill to reduce the tension in the room. With everyone finally being quiet, Mayumi climbs on stage to explain the current situation to them and says their only option is to try and escape all the fighting through a tunnel under the center. By then, Tatsuya and the others have just found the rest of the terrorists, but then he stops Leo from running straight into a barrage of anti-magic bullets and combines his powers with Miyuki's to freeze all their bullets. The next moment, he charges in and starts turning full-grown men into wall paint while they all watch in shock. After Miyuki cleans him up again, he realizes that the girls have gotten a little scared of all the blood, so he apologizes for being a bit more ruthless than usual. Shizuku then suggests going up to the conference room to figure out a new plan, but Tatsuya suggests finding their demo models for the presentation first, so they won't end up in the wrong hands. However, on getting there, they meet Sayumi, Katsudo, and everyone else already erasing every valuable piece of data. Just then, Tatsuya tells them that sending all the other students through the tunnel might have been a mistake because they might run into other terrorists and have nowhere else to go. Upon hearing this, Katsudo sends Teikaki and a bunch of other fighters to go help with the evacuation, while the rest of them head up to the conference room to figure out a plan. Minutes later, Kyoko shows up with Kazama, who then tells Tatsuya that he has to join the fight because they are dealing with national-level threats. Everyone except Miyuki gets shocked to hear this, so Tatsuya tells them to listen to whatever Kyoko says before turning to leave. Just then, Miyuki stops him and makes him take a knee before releasing his true powers and wishing him luck. Minutes later, Masaki's schoolmates take cover as the terrorists unleash an endless barrage of bullets. So he starts exploding human soldiers like water balloons while his classmates watch in shock. Around the same time, Katsudo finds Kyoko and asks for a car so he can head to the Connaught branch. But she decides to do one better and orders some of her men to leave with him. By then, Azusa and the other students have just seen the door to the bomb shelter, so she runs ahead to open it. But an enemy blast suddenly blows up the ground above them. Thankfully, Kazuo manages to hold up the debris, so they all rush into the shelter while Chiba meets up with Erika to give her a special C&D for the fight ahead. Minutes later, Tatsuya arrives in the FLT lab with Kazama, and after listening to all the upgrades they made to his flying suit, he puts it on and immediately starts shooting enemy drones down. By then, Masaki has just finished taking out the enemy soldiers attacking his mates. But after they all get inside an evacuation bus, he tells Shinkaru to leave with them because he also plans to head to the Kanto branch. After several minutes of bloodshed, one of Kazama's soldiers shows Tatsuya the sorcery booster they found in an enemy tank, proving that they have been fighting against the Great Asian Alliance this entire time. He then tells Tatsuya about Mayumi and the other civilian students who are currently trapped in the shelter, so Tatsuya flies off to defend the evacuation chopper from enemy attacks. Meanwhile, Katsudo leads every magician in the Kanto region to fight soldiers from the Alliance. But after a bunch of phantom monsters start attacking them, Masaki decides to stop dropping bodies like Prime John Wick so he can find the magic user summoning them. After using a special skill that targets non-magic users, he singles out the low-budget Merlin and quickly sends him back to his creator. Meanwhile, Kanon and the rest of the gang just got done packing up another group of enemy soldiers, so they decided to head back to the convention center. However, they suddenly get ambushed, so Kei and Teikaki try to shield the girls with their bodies, but Teikaki's leg gets blown off while Kei gets shot right in the heart. The next moment, Miyuki uses her powers to take out the rest of the enemy soldiers. She then calls Tatsuya, who immediately drops in and uses his powers to restore both Takaki and Kei like nothing happened. While Tatsuya and the other soldiers from Kyoyuko's unit continue taking out enemy soldiers, Kei and Takaki struggle to believe that they just survived a one-way trip to heaven, after the other assure them that they are still very much alive. Kenon asks Miyuki about Tatsuya's special ability and says he could save an entire civilization in a matter of minutes if he wanted to. Everyone else agrees with her and wonders why Tatsuya has always kept it secret. So Miyuki starts by explaining how his ability, which is actually called regrowth, allows him to restore humans and machines to their previous state, so long as the damage happened within a day. As they all continue yapping about how easy it would be for him to cure the entire planet, she tells them that he actually has to pay a price anytime he uses his powers. Whenever he heals someone or brings them back from the other side, his mind experiences over 100 times the original pain in less than a second, meaning that every rescue is actually a gamble with insanity since the average mind is not built to handle so much stress at once. After they all realize that it would be selfish to expect Tatsuya to become their Lazarus pit, Mizuki suddenly senses a terrifying aura heading towards the Magic Association's headquarters. She immediately tells everyone, so Mickey consults his spirits and sees that Lou is about to attack the building with the highest form of his abilities. After he tells them, Mary asks Erica and Leo to help her stop him, and they gladly agree to it before suiting up and jumping off the chopper. However, in just a couple of minutes, Lou knocks them all out. But Mayumi also decides to join the fight and uses a special ice skill to freeze Lou's airways. By then, Chen, who has just made it into the main office, meets Miyuki, who then explains that his spell was too weak to stop her before turning him into an ice sculpture. Minutes later, Tatsuya and Kyoyuko's soldiers finish with the enemy troops left by the docks. But when he tries to blow up their main ship, she calls in to stop him and explains that the ship runs on a special battery that would harm the ocean. However, about an hour later, she gives Tatsuya permission to blow them up since they have finally gotten far enough to minimize any damage. As Tatsuya grabs a special long-distance blaster to blow up the ship, the enemy commander mocks them for being too sentimental and receives the last shock of his life when Tatsuya lets off the shot and sends them to the Lord in a split second. Hours later, Miyuki gets a call from Maya, who immediately starts asking why she is all alone in such a dangerous situation. Miyuki then explains that Tatsuya is occupied with military duties and reminds Maya that Tatsuya's ability is essentially a guarantee that she will always be okay. Around the same time, Tatsuya learns that the East has just mobilized an entire fleet to attack Japan, and since most of their resources were already spent during the first attack, Tatsuya decides to use a special burst skill against them. After receiving approval, he takes off with the specialized blaster and unleashes a colossal explosion that completely obliterates the entire fleet and leaves a crater right in the middle of the ocean. Days later, life slowly returns to normal in the academy, but everyone remains cautious since Tatsuya's attack finally sealed the importance of magic military in the history books.
2 months after the Halloween incident, Tatsuya and his friends celebrate a farewell party for Shizuku, who is about to leave for America. Shizuku announces to them that she will be staying there for 3 months as a foreign exchange student, and that the person who will take her spot at the academy is a chick. Meanwhile, in America, a commander named Lena opens up to her colleague, Ben, about her nervousness about a trip to Japan, as she is being sent by their agency to investigate whether Tatsuya is the strategic class magician responsible for the Halloween incident, but she is not very good at undercover work. Ben assures her that such an operation needs to be done with caution, which is why the agency is sending a commander like her, who is good at making contact with suspects and throwing them off balance. Hearing this, she agrees Ben has a point and thanks him for his advice, but also instructs him to watch the fort in her care while she embarks on the mission. Later in the evening, Tatsuya and Miyuki video call Maya, their hot melon's aunt, who spills the tea about how an American agency is searching for the strategic class magician responsible for the Halloween incident and advises Tatsuya to be careful. The following week, Tatsuya introduces Master Yakumo to his friends as his martial arts teacher, after which they all go sightseeing. On the way, Tatsuya notices Lena watching him like a paparazzi trying to take a picture, and when Miyuki notices and asks if Lena is one of his side chicks, he assures Miyuki that she is the only woman in his life, which makes Miyuki start to blush. However, Miyuki still feels some type of way about Lena, but but Tatsuya just talks about how Lena's outfit is similar to his grandma's favorite couch. Shortly after, Lena returns to her apartment, but Sylvie, her assistant, is not a fan of her outfit choice. Even though Lena explains that she is just trying to embrace Japanese culture, Sylvie wastes no time in telling her about how she looks like a fashionable mistake. Sylvie promises to teach her Japanese fashion trends before she goes out to disgrace herself again, and she immediately complies. The following day at school, Lena, in the company of Miyuki and Honoka, approaches Tatsuya and his gang's table for lunch, and Honoka introduces Lena to them as the new transfer student. Lena quickly stops her, reminding her she has a mouth of her own, which leaves Honoka embarrassed because she was just trying to be nice. Lena then turns to the table and officially introduces herself. Hearing her surname, Tatsuya asks if she is related to Kudo, one of the patriarchs at the academy, and she confirms that she is, stating that the connection was what secured her a spot at the academy in the first place. After that, Lena and Miyuki converge at the practice room to showcase their skill to see who is better, and Lena fails woefully, much to her disappointment. Later in the evening, Tatsuya tells Miyuki about how he has confirmed that Lena's real identity is that of a commander from the agency their aunt told them about. He then opens up about how Lena's attributes do not fit into the category of a spy, and he wonders if there is an actual spy while Lena is just used as a distraction. However, since Lena is a high-ranked commander, he feels that the real mission may be something else. In the meantime, Lena returns home to see Mia, her friend from the agency, and quickly asks that Sylvie prepare a tea for them. After the tea, Lena asks if Sylvie has come up with any clues regarding the strategic class magician, and Sylvie replies that she hit a dead end. She then asks Mia, who is also undercover at a different academy, only for Mia to reply that she has nothing to. Disappointed, Lena also talks about how she has not found anything meaningful from Tatsuya. 2 days later, Lena suddenly blocks Tatsuya in the hallway to talk about how she has been doing some investigation regarding his uniform, and she found out from his friends that he is the most powerful student in his class, so she asks why he is pretending to be an irregular. In response, Tatsuya claims that he is an irregular, who is only skilled in fighting but a dullard in other aspects. Lena then lets him know that she also plans to be a magician who is useful in fighting, but Tatsuya just thinks she is challenging him to a duel. Right on cue, she attacks him, but he stops her midway, talking about how reckless she is moving. He then releases her after she claims that she was just testing him, and even though she tells him she did not plan to hurt him in the first place, he lets her know that it does not justify attacking him like a lunatic. With that, she apologizes for being rude, so he relaxes, stating that it is fine. He then proceeds to take his leave, but she stops him to ask if he is curious about her background, but he claims that he is good, which leaves her pissed because she was expecting him to ask. Later in the night, Sylvie suddenly interrupts Lena's sleep to tell her about an emergency, so Lena rushes to get the intel from Ben via video call, and she learns that some fugitives they arrested the previous month have now escaped to Japan. She also finds that she has been ordered to make catching the fugitives her top priority, while the Tatsuya mission should be placed on hold for now. In another part of the town, the fugitives talk about how the latest victim they eliminated failed to possess their attribute after being experimented on her, which leaves them disappointed as they plan to practice on other victims. The following morning, news of the murder becomes a hot topic among the students, but Leo just yawns, already running on a single battery % before the first period bell even rings. Erika yaps onto Tatsuya about how the fugitives, which she refers to as vampires, are members of a professional organization that traffics blood. Tatsuya notes that he heard only 10% of the victim's blood was taken and wonders why the vampires do that, especially since the victim's body did not have any form of wound. Shiba replies that an occult being may be responsible since that is what is being said on the news. Hearing this, he points out that the occult used to be considered as magic a century ago, so Erika cuts in to ask if he thinks a magician is responsible. Shiba quickly tells her to dead the narrative because there is a group that already does not like magicians, so starting such rumors will cause more harm than good. During lunch break, Tatsuya notices that he has not seen Lena, and Miyuki lets him know that Lena told her she has an emergency at home. Honoka then talks about how she called Shizuku the previous night, only to learn that the vampire case is also common in America. Hearing this worries Tatsuya, and when Honoka adds that Shizuku said she had it from another student because the incident did not make the news, he becomes suspicious. A few hours later, Sylvie starts to dish out instructions to Lena and some other agents through their communication channel on how to track down the fugitives. In the meantime, Deimos, one of the fugitives, just eliminated another victim, only to receive intel that Lena is on her way to his place. Seconds later, an agent named Claire holds him at gunpoint and tells him to surrender. Just then, Rachel, another agent, ambushes him by using a cast jammer to block Deimos' magical device while asking him to provide information about the other fugitives, but Deimos breaks the attack, to the agent's surprise. Deimos then claims that he does not need a magical device anymore, but the agents start to attack him anyway, and he blocks all their attacks effortlessly until Lena, dressed in her disguise, suddenly arrives to attack Deimos. Deimos quickly releases multiple knives to distract them and escapes because he is scared of facing Lena alone. In another part of the area, Leo takes an evening stroll only to find a dead chick on a bench. Before he can check on her, Deimos' partner distracts him, and the two get into an intense fight. While at it, Deimos' partner suddenly grabs Leo's hands to absorb his energy, and Leo becomes weak instantly. Even at that, he uses the remaining strength in him to land a Superman punch on Deimos' partner's face, causing the person to fall. Leo then starts to think of how to get himself to the emergency room now that he can't walk on his own, only for Deimos' partner to stand up once more. But soon notices Lena coming in his way and runs off. Leo also sees Lena pass by and wonders who she may be. However, Lena loses sight of Deimos' partner, which leaves her disappointed. The following morning, Tatsuya and the gang go to check up on Leo at the hospital. Leo briefs them about how he fought Daitro's partner till he became weak as a kitten, and how Erika's big brother, the police chief, found him and took him to the hospital. He also describes how the person dressed like a hospital attendant, avoiding COVID, so it was hard to get the person's face, but he has a strong feeling the person is a chick. Mikihiko points out that a chick can't win Leo in a fistfight, but Erika finds Mikihiko's statement offensive and tells him to find a chick's trouble first and see how fast he gets humbled. Still, Mikihiko feels the person is not human, and when Tatsuya asks if he has something else in mind, he suggests that Leo may have run into a parasite. Shiba tells him to explain more, and he talks about how parasites have magical properties that latch onto people and turn them into something other than human. He also asks Leo to show him his spiritual energy while the others listen to him explain how parasites love feeding on spiritual energy. As a former caster himself, he found the stories of the attackers being vampires absurd, so if Leo lets him examine his spirit energy, he should be able to see what they are dealing with. Leo gives him the go-ahead, and he starts the analysis, only to be surprised to see that Leo is still acting fine because his reports show that Leo should be in a comatose state since a lot of his spirit energy was stolen. Hearing this, Leo starts to brag about how his body is made of premium-grade materials. On the way out of Leo's ward, Mikihiko starts to wonder why the person absorbed Leo's spirit energy and still stole his blood. Getting to the ground floor, Tatsuya asks Mikihiko if the occurrence of parasites is common, and Mikihiko replies that it is usually rare. Unknown to them, Leo was actually faking his well-being because he did not want his friends to worry, and only Erika, who stayed behind to watch him, knows this. A few hours later, the two agents brief Lena on their report on Deimos before Lena interrupted their fight and heard that the caster jammer did not work, to Erika's surprise. Moving forward, she instructs them not to talk with the fugitives any longer because she will deal with that part herself, and they comply. After the meeting, Lena transforms back to her original self, talking about how she missed snatching the body before telling Sylvie that she wonders why the fugitives are targeting the Japanese. Though she is unsure, Sylvie replies that it may have to do with the strange ability they've gained. In the meantime, Segusa and Jumanji talk about how a student of their academy is now the latest victim of the vampire's attack. Segusa also points out that most of the victims are magicians affiliated with her family, and this pisses Jumanji off because he thinks the vampire is targeting only magicians. He then adds that the vampire must be a foreigner to touch a member of her family without thinking there would be repercussions. She points out that the only foreigner in their academy she knows is Lena, but Jumanji feels Lena does not have the balls to eliminate people, but suggests they still watch her. On that note, she asks that her family and his family collaborate to find the vampires, and he agrees. The following weekend, Tatsuya spars with Yakumo, and after they are done, Tatsuya asks about the crazy spell Yakumo pulled during the fight. Yakumo explains that he calls the spell the Cocoon Water Mirage, and it is a technique that deceives the eyes of things and not of the world. Confused, Tatsuya asks him to explain further, and Yakumo tells him that it is not only humans they spar against, and there may be times they have to fight supernatural things. Tatsuya points out that a friend of his told him that encountering such things is usually rare, so Yakumo lets him know that what he and his gang call spiritual beings are not actually from their world. Tatsuya then asks that, since spirits are considered independent information bodies derived from natural phenomena, according to modern magic, if parasites feed off somebody's spirit energy and change the person's properties, then what information bodies would they be based on? Though Yakumo does not know the origin of parasites, he suggests that it may be in the spirit phenomena since they interfere with people's minds. The following day at school, Tatsuya asks Shizuku, via video call, to fill him in on the details of the vampire in her area. Shizuku replies that the news does not cover it and asks what's up, so he briefs her on what went down with the vampires and Leo. Relieved that Leo is okay, Shizuku asks if Tatsuya thinks America has some clues. Tatsuya then replies that he believes the idiot behind the vampire incident must be from America, so he warns her to be careful, stating that she should only walk in groups, and she nods in response. Later in the evening, Mikihiko and Erika go on a night patrol to check if they will see any vampires they can take out. Though Mikihiko wishes they could just collaborate with Jumanji and Segusa, Erika urges him to accompany her. In another part of town, Lena chases after Deimos once again, and when he disappears, Sylvie, who is monitoring them, informs Lena of where Deimos went, so Lena calls on Claire and Rachel to join the chase. She then shoots a dagger activated with a movement spell in Deimos' direction. Seconds later, the dagger hits Deimos, prompting Rachel to stab him with her knife. Lena arrives soon after to shoot him, and he immediately falls to the ground. Just then, she notices another vampire and chases after him. While at it, Erika and Mikihiko notice them and run after them, thinking they are both vampires. When Erika and Mikihiko ambush them, they start to fight each other. Lena notices that Erika's swordsmanship is top-notch, and Erika also notices that Lena's magic abilities will give Harry Potter a run for his money. Mikihiko also faces off with the vampire by casting a spell that makes the fugitive get struck by thunder. However, Mikihiko notices that the thunder lasts longer than he expected, only for the vampire to channel the thunder back in his direction, and he barely dodges it. The vampire then proceeds to send Mikihiko to the Lord, but Tatsuya interrupts him by shooting at him, thereby alerting the others. Immediately, Lena attacks him with a magical device, but Tatsuya blocks it, and the vampire uses the distraction to escape. Tatsuya then checks for Lena's background information, but nothing comes up, which leaves him confused, and Lena escapes soon after. On the way back, Lena asks Sylvie if she recovered Deimos' remains during the course of the fight, and Sylvie confirms that she did so. She then tells Sylvie to focus on finding the identity of the other vampire that got away. After that, she starts to think of how both Erika and Tatsuya know their onions, which leaves her embarrassed because, as a commander, she is supposed to be better than them. A few hours later, Tatsuya video calls his Hot Melon's aunt to ask about how the Kudo family spell works because he has the intuition that the chick he met earlier is Lena. His aunt replies that it is the family's secret technique, so how does he expect her to know? With that, he explains how he believes the spell can temporarily alter one's physical appearance, but his aunt is just surprised that he, of all people, believes in transformation magic, so he explains his encounter with Lena and how he could not read up any information on her. To be on the safer side, he asks his aunt to send reinforcements because he believes Lena may be an enemy, and his aunt permits him to contact Major Kazama for that. The following day, Jumonji and Seigusa tell Tatsuya that they are working together to investigate the vampire murders and would love for him to join them and let them work together. Tatsuya then asks what they know about the situation and their plans on how to solve the case, because if he does not know that, he is not going to join them. Seigusa promises to tell him everything, and he complies. After the explanation, Tatsuya realizes that the victims are more than he imagined, which means that they are dealing with multiple vampires. Jumonji then tells him to continue to work on his own, but he must report any clues he finds to them, and he complies. A few hours later, he proceeds to start his patrol, but Miyuki feels bad that he is leaving her alone, so he assures her that he will be needing his help soon, and she hopes the day comes soon. Shortly after, Tatsuya tracks Lena down to where she is dealing with some vampires, and he shoots the vampire. Annoyed that he interfered in her fight, she pulls out her gun, only for him to return the favor. She then shoots him, but he stops the shot and removes her spell to reveal her normal self, which catches her by surprise. Furious that her cover has been blown, Lena starts to shoot at Tatsuya, but he blocks each bullet effortlessly and dismantles her weapon in the process. Still, she heads in his direction and throws a knife at him with illusion magic, but Tatsuya sees through this and throws a grenade in her direction, so she quickly creates a barrier to avoid being cooked. After that, she falls and calls him crazy, but he claims that he had to do something to capture her. He then proceeds to tie her hand, so she quickly activates her blade to slice him into chopped meat. He senses the directions that the blades are coming towards him, and he dismantles them, thereby catching Lena completely off guard. He then handcuffs her, so she starts to scream for help. Immediately, her officers in the area arrive to stop him, thinking he is an attacker, but he throws Lena at them and beats them to a pulp. Sensing there is no way out, Lena comes clean and introduces herself as an American agent. After that, she tells him that she will take him out because he knows her true identity and proceeds to shoot him, but Miyuki quickly interrupts her and turns the rest of her officers into frozen food. Yakumo also joins them, and seeing that he has the upper hand, Tatsuya proceeds to ask Lena some questions. Lena quickly counters him, stating it is unfair to answer under duress since it is 3 against 1. So he suggests they go band for band in a challenge, and if he wins, she must honestly answer her questions. She agrees to his request, but Miyuki cuts in to suggest that she face her instead because she cannot forgive her for going against her brother. She then agrees to face her, confident she will win, and seeing the tension between the ladies, Tatsuya decides to take a back seat and watch them play it out. Shortly after, Yakumo proceeds with the duel and declares it open, but Tatsuya quickly meets with Miyuki and plants a kiss on her forehead to transfer his control of magic to her to get the upper hand. After that, the fight starts properly, and after minutes of back and forth casting of spells, Lina notices that Miyuki is seeing through her spells and wonders if Tatsuya told her about her techniques when they were having their intimate session earlier. Even at that, Lina determines not to lose to Miyuki and casts a spell that Miyuki quickly counters with her own spell, which affects the whole area. The two chicks hold on to the spell for minutes until Lina starts seeing a glimpse of the afterlife, so Tatsuya quickly stops them to avoid a candlelight in her name. After he is done, Lina proudly accepts that she lost to show her sportsmanship and encourages him to ask whatever question he has for her on the condition that she only gives a yes or no answer. The following morning, Lina crashes out to Sylvie because she did not believe she actually lost the duel, so a clueless Sylvie reminds her that she is one of the best commanders that their agency has ever produced. Lina calms down after a cup of tea and asks Sylvie if there has been any update from the headquarters. However, there is no update from headquarters, so Sylvie briefs her on the current state of the wounded officers who were victims during her fight with Tatsuya. Sylvie also adds that Mia's team, which has been sent to investigate the strategic class magician, has not gotten any noteworthy results yet. Hearing this, Lina realizes that she has not actually heard from Mia in a while, so Sylvie lets her know that Mia is delivering some magical device adjustment instruments to her academy the following day, and Lina immediately looks forward to meeting with her. In the meantime, Erika and Mikihiko wait for Tatsuya, who suddenly scheduled an urgent meeting, only for them to see Jumanji and Segusa walk in to their utmost surprise. Tatsuya walks in soon after and announces the commencement of the meeting. He begins by talking about how he encountered a vampire, also known as a parasite, the previous night, and he believes the parasite must be a magician on the run from an American agency. Hearing this catches them by surprise, only for them to learn that the parasite may also be more than one. Erika wonders what the agency may be up to, and Jumanji talks about how the agency has a unit that handpicks magicians for special missions, so they may be them. Mikihiko quickly points out that he thought military magicians were strictly controlled by each country and wonders if America's discipline has gone soft. So Tatsuya replies that the parasite's influence must have been stronger than the military regulations, because parasites have the power to change a person's mental and physical state. With that, he announces that he would love to take on the parasites himself, but he does not mind if they take the glory for the whole thing because he just wants to get revenge for how they treated his guy, Leo. Jumanji gives him the go-ahead, but Erika and Mikihiko just stare in confusion, wondering what the dude is up to. On the way back home, Miyuki notices that Tatsuya is worried, and she asks if it is about Lina. Tatsuya then opens up to her about how he has always found Lina suspicious, but did not mention it because he wanted to mind his business, but now that Leo is hurt, he can't just stand by and do nothing. Hearing this warms Miyuki's heart, and he praises him for having compassion for people. After Tatsuya left the meeting, the others decided to put Segusa in charge of coordinating information for the parasite search. Now that Segusa is thinking about it, she feels like Tatsuya may actually be using them to get a lead. With that, she vows to give him the bitterest chocolate known to man during the upcoming Valentine's Day as payback. Meanwhile, Tatsuya is chilling at home with Miyuki when a call from Shizuku suddenly comes in. Shizuku then lets him know that she heard from her colleagues that the reason for the parasite spread is that an experiment accidentally created little dark holes, but she has no idea what the experiment may be. Tatsuya replies that such experiments are usually used to create small black holes in order to harness energy from them. Miyuki then wonders what such experiments have to do with parasites, so he explains that since magic does not abide by the rule of energy, the experiment allows the supply of energy from a different dimension. The following day, a disappointed Erika complains to Shiba that Tatsuya completely ghosted their parasite hunting squad, robbing her of the romantic, trauma-bonding experience she'd been looking forward to. Just then, Mikihiko walks in to hand them sandwiches, stating that it is from Tatsuya, who thinks that Erika has been avoiding him since the meeting. Shiba then tells Erika that she has nothing to worry about since Tatsuya is trying to act nice. While at it, Shiba suddenly feels a strange car penetrate the academy's barrier, and she informs the others that a parasite has entered the academy. Ready to throw some punches, Erika tells Mikihiko to lead the way, but he tells her to chill and let them grab their magical device first, and also contact the others. In the meantime, Lina also sensed the parasite and is on her way to the school's entrance, especially since she is also expecting Mia. In another part of the academy, Miyuki suddenly feels an unaware wave, and she tells Tatsuya about it. Since he can't sense anything, he wonders if what Miyuki is feeling is a parasite presence. Just then, Segusa calls him to inform him about the parasite and the parasite's current location, so he heads there, and Miyuki follows suit. Getting to the location, Miyuki and Tatsuya see Lina meeting with Mia, and Tatsuya casts a spell to see if he can try to hear their conversation. In the meantime, Mikihiko also notices them and informs the others, who conclude that Lina may be an accomplice to Mia, who they suspect is the parasite. With that, Mikihiko throws a barrier in their direction to block their vision and hearing. Seeing this, Tatsuya praises Mikihiko's skill, while a confused Lina wonders why they are being targeted. Erika soon rushes towards them to strike Mia, but Lina stops her midway. Still, Erika continues to chase after Mia, which makes Lena try to stop her, only to get stopped by Jumanji. Erika continues to chase after Mia, and when she proceeds to strike Mia, Mia stops her with her bare hands, which leaves Erika and Lena completely shocked. Just then, Lena receives intel from Sylvie, who claims that Mia is the other parasite she faced during her last fight with the parasites. Surprised, Lena calls on Mia to confirm, only to see that Mia has now transformed into a full-blown parasite. Erika quickly rushes to pierce Mia, but Mia heals herself instantly. Miyuki then turns Mia to ice, while Tatsuya tells Lena that he will be taking Mia with him. However, Erika states that she does not want Mia to be taken away because Mia hurt Leo, and she wants to deal with Mia herself. Tatsuya agrees to Erika's wish, but the parasite in Mia suddenly defrosts Mia and transforms into ball lightning to attack them. As they continue to block all of Mia's attacks, Tatsuya quickly tries to sense where the parasite is shooting from, and when he gets it, Tatsuya tells Jumanji that the parasite may have a reason for keeping all of them together. Tatsuya then asks Lena if she knows anything, and Lena replies that the parasite may be looking for a new host to take over. In the meantime, Mikihiko notices that the parasite is specifically targeting Erika, and he wonders what he can do to help. Shiba quickly tells him to use her barrier, and even though he refuses at first, because it would be too dangerous for Shiba, he agrees after seeing that she really wants to save Erika. So he gives her protective gear to protect herself with, and they begin casting the spell. With the spell in full effect, Shiba points his attention to the real parasite, and he quickly casts a lightning spell at the parasite to destroy it. The sound alerts Tatsuya, who quickly senses that Mikihiko is literally exposing himself to the parasite, so when the parasite heads in Mikihiko's direction, he quickly casts a barrier to protect both Mikihiko and Shiba and stop the parasite. However, Tatsuya senses that the parasite got away just as Jumanji thanks him for saving their heads. The following week, Sylvie informs Lena that their headquarters has requested her return because they believe she was not good enough to offer Lena support during her mission, and she apologizes to her. Lena quickly stops her from apologizing and lets her know it is fine. After that, Lena meets with the deputy commissioner of their agency, who expresses her disappointment in how Lena failed the mission she was given. In a bid to redeem herself, Lena assures her that she will vindicate herself, so the commissioner tells her to continue the mission, promising to provide more support, and she immediately agrees. The following morning, Tatsuya tries to see if he can track down the parasite's origin with a new spell, while Yakumo and Miyuki watch him. However, he fails midway, and Yakumo assures him that it is absolutely fine for a pro like him to fail something as basic as that. Yakumo then advises him to go for it again. Miyuki also encourages him to go for it, urging him to make his wonderful ideas a reality, and he agrees to try again. 2 days later, Tatsuya and Miyuki find out that the black hole experiment thing has made the news, and the news accuses the American agency of summoning a demon from another dimension with the experiment. With the news talking about how the military and the magicians should be held accountable for the situation because the military failed to regulate magicians, Tatsuya wastes no time talking about how the news is Olympic-level sugarcoating, knowing damn well it's just a socially acceptable way of trying to kick magicians to the curb. Later in the evening, Tatsuya asks Lena, while they take a stroll with Miyuki, if she has heard the news. Lena replies that she did and also adds that everything the newscaster was spilling was just lies from the pits of hell. Tatsuya then tells her that they are trying to manipulate public opinion, and he wonders who may be responsible for leaking the issue to the press. Lena replies that it is probably the work of a group known as the Seven Sages, and even though her agency has always tried to investigate them to know what they are about, they always hit a dead end. Tatsuya then asks if she at least knows if her agency intentionally drew the parasite to their world. Annoyed by the question, Lena claims that they did not and adds that if she later finds out someone did, she will hunt them down and show them the absolute textbook definition of the word merciless. Shortly after, Tatsuya tells Miyuki about how he has not seen Honoka in a while, and Miyuki tells him that Honoka is probably busy preparing chocolate for Valentine's Day, which is the next day. Though Tatsuya praises Honoka for always putting effort into all she does, he feels bad that he cannot love her the way she loves him. Feeling threatened, Miyuki quickly tells him not to think that way and assures him that she and Honoka only want the best for him, which leaves him relieved. Lena quickly breaks their intimate session to remind them she is still with them and asks why the chocolate stuff is causing a buzz because she has heard Honoka talk about it before. Miyuki then explains that their academy takes chocolate gifting on Valentine's Day seriously and asks who she would be gifting. She replies that she is too popular to give just one person chocolate because it will lead to problems and asks if Miyuki will finally summon the courage to gift Tatsuya. Miyuki then lets her know that Tatsuya is her brother, so it is just going to be weird, which leaves her surprised because she always sees them act like lovers. The following morning, Honoka shyly gives Tatsuya the chocolate she made for him. Tatsuya accepts the gift and gives her a gift bag in return, which catches her by surprise. She then opens the bag to see that they are cute hair ribbons, and she thanks him heartily, but unknown to her, her reaction to the gift emits a spell that immediately connects her to Pixie, their school's robot. After the interaction, Tatsuya goes to class, and he is relieved to see that Leo is back in class, looking hale and hearty. The others also greet Leo, and Leo thanks them for always coming to greet him. Shiba then gifts them all chocolate, and Erika teases Leo if he resumes early just for the chocolates, and he angrily tries to defend himself. During lunch break, Segusa calls on Tatsuya to come join her at her table, but seeing a student stagger away from her table after tasting her chocolate makes him worry. Still, Segusa hands him his chocolate, and even though he feels like the chocolate smells like coffee, he accepts anyway, only for her to instruct him to take a bite in her presence. He then uses the chance to ask them to discuss something important privately. Getting to the coffee room, Tatsuya talks about how the news has not been talking about the parasite lately and asks if the damage has subsided. Segusa lets him know that more people are still missing daily, but she feels the parasites are just trying to keep it low now that they've become a class celebrity. After the meeting, Segusa reminds him of the chocolate gift, so he has a bite of the disaster, which leaves her satisfied that she has finally fulfilled her mission. On the way home after school, Tatsuya starts coughing, thereby leaving Miyuki worried, and she offers to take his bag for him. At the train station, Tatsuya suddenly notices a hidden camera, so he holds Miyuki close. His reaction immediately alerts the American agents spying on him, and they begin to wonder if he noticed the camera because he looked directly at it. Getting home, Miyuki channels her inner housewife vibe by making a chocolate-themed meal for dinner. As she eats with Tatsuya, her face keeps getting flushed because she keeps imagining them as a married couple. After dinner, she packs the plate only to miss a step, but Tatsuya quickly grabs her and tells her to rest, but she just stares at him dreamily. As she watches him do the dishes soon after, she begins to feel bad that being his sister is limiting her from jumping him, only to get shocked that such a thought crossed her mind. 1 week later, Lena suddenly receives orders from her deputy commissioner to return to her first mission, which is to investigate whether Tatsuya is behind the scorched Halloween incident. The commissioner then shows her a weapon named Brionac, instructing her to use it to eliminate Tatsuya if push comes to shove, and she agrees to the order. The following morning, Tatsuya and the others check on Pixie after receiving a report that she has been acting weird. A student explains to Tatsuya that Pixie suddenly started trying to access the Academy's server after her daily recharge, and the command was executed from her electronic brain. However, the Academy's system eventually shut down, but this just makes Pixie smile like she is excited that it happened. Hearing this, Tatsuya tries to check on Pixie himself by commanding her to get into inspection mode, but Pixie just hugs him in response, which leaves Miyuki jealous that she starts wrongfully accusing Tatsuya of leading the poor robot on. Tatsuya breaks free from Pixie's hold and instructs Shiba to take a look at Pixie. Shiba then gets to work and sees that Pixie has been infected by the parasite. As she takes a closer look, she tells the others that the parasite is acting under the influence of Honoka's thought waves, copying them. Honoka quickly makes it clear that she knows nothing about the issue, and Tatsuya tells Honoka to chill since it is not intentional, and Shiba confirms that the thoughts are more like residual thoughts. Pixie also confirms Shiba's statement by telling them through telepathy that the parasite awakened after receiving strong feelings towards Tatsuya, which leaves Honoka flustered. Tatsuya confirms with Pixie if it is the parasite from before, only to learn that all the parasites are similar and they don't really have any knowledge of their previous host. Hearing this, Tatsuya asks if she is an enemy, but she lets him know that she just wants to be with him since she awoke from the thoughts of Honoka. A surprised Honoka then tries to stop the robot from spilling all the dirty thoughts she has had about Tatsuya, but her friends physically restrain her to let the robot cook. The robot continues to talk about how she wants to be with Tatsuya and how her body craves his touch, while Honoka watches in defeat. Tatsuya then asks if the robot is going to follow his instructions, and upon hearing her eagerness, he decides to make her his subordinate. He also orders her to never use her powers without him giving the go-ahead, and she agrees. A few hours later, American agents head into a restaurant to ambush Tatsuya, who just wants to have a nice time. Upon entering the restaurant, Tatsuya starts to shoot them because he already sensed their presence before they arrived, and a fight breaks out between them. As they continue to fight, Tatsuya scans them and figures that they are acting on enhanced powers that will only shorten their lifespan, so he does them a favor by sending them to the Lord early. After he is done, a beam of light that he barely dodges heads in his direction, only to see that the attacker is Lena dressed in her disguise, holding a Brionac. Lena then runs off, prompting him to chase after him. As this is going on, the deputy commissioner monitors the fight closely from the tactical room, wondering why Lena used the Brionac early. Tatsuya chases her to a park, where she reveals her true self and orders him to surrender before she blows his head off with Brionac. She then powers Brionac to show she means business, but Tatsuya escapes the shot, injuring his arm in the process. He then recognizes the crazy weapon as one of the weapons the Celtic god of light possessed, but Lena just wants him to surrender before he loses his other arm in the fight. Tatsuya refuses, so she powers the Brionac again, only for him to stop the weapon with the same arm he got injured with, which catches her by surprise. Apparently, he used a healing spell to heal his arm, and he continues to shoot Lena. After getting her injured, he advises Lena to quit her agency for her own good because he believes she is too soft for her role. On his way back home, he calls Hayama to tell him about the attack. He talks about how he took out all the agents, including their backup team, and also how he took their data after erasing it from their server. He then adds that he healed Lena's wound and erased every sign that they had fought from her memory. Hayama tells him to submit the data to him immediately, and he complies. The following morning, Lena wakes up in her backup team's van only to find it empty. She then tries to check the surveillance for clues, only to find it corrupted, leaving her frustrated as she wonders if Tatsuya is not just a strategic magician, but a magician capable of illusion. With that, she calls the agency's control room, not knowing that the room is empty. The following day, Tatsuya visits Pixie to learn more about the parasites. During the course of the interrogation, he confirms that the parasites are indeed responsible for their victims' blood loss, and it is a result of a side effect of a mistaken propagation during their transmission into the victim's body. He also learns that the parasites communicate with each other through the same consciousness that they share. However, when he asks her for the other parasite's location, she reveals that she has no idea, but she can sense that they are searching for her through their thought waves. A few minutes later, Tatsuya hands Pixie clothes she can change into, and Pixie immediately starts stripping. A jealous Miyuki quickly blocks Tatsuya from seeing Pixie, and even though he claims Pixie is just a robot, she insists that he must turn around, so he complies. After Pixie is done, Tatsuya takes her in the company of Miyuki and Honoka to the cemetery to see if there may be any parasites possessing the ghosts. Tatsuya also sends a group text to the others to let them know about the latest update. When Erika gets the text, she quickly tells her gang of thugs that they will be heading to the cemetery. In the meantime, Ayako, a cousin of Tatsuya, visits the dejected deputy commissioner to appeal to her to stop attacking the magicians in her country, claiming that the leader of her clan is very concerned about their crazy activities. Ayako also adds that her leader believes that since their countries are affiliated to each other, it does not make sense for them to let their affair trigger any form of conflict, but the deputy commissioner just sees this as a threat. Ayako then innocently asks if the commissioner slept well the previous night, but this just makes the commissioner think that she may have something to do with the attack on her agents. However, Ayako does not decline or accept the claim and just tells her that her clan would love them to collaborate since they are both powerful, stating that they would never take the collaboration for granted, because if an opportunity to help them comes in the future, they will pull up like their knight in shining armor. The commissioner then thinks of this offer for a while before accepting it. In another part of town, Tatsuya suddenly senses that some people are spying on him, only to find out that it is the intelligence unit he is affiliated with, because they want to monitor him since he is a great asset to them. However, Honoka puts them to sleep with her coma spells, thinking they are a threat because she wants him to find her cool. Unknown to her, her skill impresses the chairman of the unit, who is watching from the tactical room and becomes curious about her. Tatsuya and the others continue their journey until 3 parasites approach them for a talk. Marte, one of the parasites, tells them that they would love to end the beef happening between them and the magicians, but they must hand Pixie over in exchange for that. Tatsuya then questions why they want her. So Marte replies that they just want the parasite that is imprisoned in Pixie's body because his species does not like that the parasite is inside a robot. Marte then talks about how they will need to dismantle the robot's body, so Tatsuya asks Pixie if she loves the idea of that. Pixie quickly shakes her head in response because she wants to be with him. So he informs Marte about her reply and asks if they would allow the parasite to take over another innocent victim if they eventually get to dismantle the robot. Annoyed by the question, Marte tells him to just focus on the fact that they won't wage war against magicians anymore. He then explains how the former Marte used to be a magician before he took over his body, so he knows how humans treat magicians like lab rats, so he does not expect Tatsuya to care if they will be turning humans into their personal Airbnbs. Tatsuya lets him know that his species has a track record of hurting magicians, so how can he be sure that they are not going to hurt them again in the future? With that, Tatsuya gives him a no as an answer, thereby prompting him and his minions to get into offensive mode. Tatsuya points his weapon at them, telling them to surrender, but Marte refuses, so he shoots him and starts to think of how he can end him for good. Remembering Yakumo's teaching, he aims straight for Marte's heart, thereby causing Marte to act like a sleepy dog dancing disco. And when one of Marte's minions tries to attack Tatsuya as revenge, Miyuku quickly turns him to ice, while Honoka faces off with the other Marte's minions to protect Pixie. Just then, Honoka's hair ribbon sparkles, thereby causing Pixie's eyes to glow. So when the minion rushes at them, Pixie's heart suddenly glows, and the minion falls from the impact, while Tatsuya watches in surprise. The chairman also sees Honoka and Pixie's antics and immediately thinks Pixie possesses some kind of psychic powers, but when Kyoko, his assistant, tells him that it is impossible, he wonders if Pixie has been possessed by the parasite causing the ruckus. In the meantime, Tatsuya captures the parasites and goes to check on Honoka, who has passed out due to the shock from the attack. He worries that the intelligence may have seen the incident, and Miyuki asks if they should leave with Honoka. Before he can reply, Leo, Erika, and Mikihiko rush towards them. After confirming that Leo is fit for patrol, Tatsuya asks Erika if he has any idea of where they can take the parasites to. Erika suggests Mikihiko's storehouse, and Mikihiko agrees to take them there. With that, Erika tells Mikihiko and Leo to follow her to the storehouse, and when Tatsuya offers to tag along, Mikihiko reminds him to take care of Honoka. Shortly after, they all head back home, and Tatsuya uses the chance to ask a now conscious Honoka if she sensed what Pixie did during the fight, but she claims that she has no idea. Tatsuya then explains that her head ribbon transferred some powers to Pixie just before Pixie turned into a female Shazam, which leaves Honoka stunned. Tatsuya also points out that it may have something to do with the fact that Pixie copied Honoka's thoughts, which may have created a pathway for them to connect, and the medium to do that must have been through the hair ribbon. Honoka touches the ribbon to confirm, and Pixie's chest glows in response. Still, Honoka does not wish to give up the ribbons since they are gifts from Tatsuya. So Tatsuya assures her that they will find a way to control them, which leaves her relieved. In the meantime, some wannabe cops stop Erika and the boys to question what they are doing with the parasites, but Erika calls their bluff and starts to accuse them of being fake, since her elder brother is a cop, so she knows how they operate. While at it, some attackers from a different group suddenly interrupt them to engage them in a fight. Mikihiko quickly gets into fighting mode and starts to cast a spell to take the attackers out. While at it, he notices that the attackers are trying to distract them from taking the parasites, but before he can act, the attackers create a distraction and take the parasites with them, which makes them wonder who the hell they are. A few minutes later, one of the members of the attackers reports to their base that they've gotten the parasites, and their boss praises them for a job well done before telling them to commence an experiment on them. The following morning, Erika and the boys awkwardly try to report to Tatsuya that they lost the parasites, but Tatsuya quickly figures it out before they talk. They then explain that another group came for the parasites, talking about how they were well armed, as if they were preparing for World War III. Tatsuya tells them he is just glad they are safe, which makes Erika wonder if he knows the group because he is acting too chill. Tatsuya replies that the group must be the Japan Ground Defense, given the way they are describing it, and he tells them they will come up with a better plan for the next time they try to capture parasites. Meanwhile, the deputy commissioner receives a call from Ayako, who briefs her that the Japanese defense has captured 3 parasites, and she found out that one of the parasites used to be a magician that worked for the commissioner's agency. Ayako then sends Martez details to cross-check, and when Ayako asks if she is interested in seeing him in person, she confirms that she is. Later in the afternoon, Tatsuya meets with Seguza since her family has ties with Japan's defense and tries to discourage her from using the parasites for military purposes. However, Seguza is just hearing the news for the first time and asks why Tatsuya did not tell her he was going to capture some parasites. She then learns that he was just trying to see if he could get the parasites unaware, so she assures him that she will get her father to release the parasites to him. Tatsuya replies that he just wants to know the reason why they took the parasites away in the first place, and if it is for selfish reasons, she should tell them the public won't find it funny when they find out. Seguza promises to relay his message, but he should not expect much because her hands are literally tied when it comes to political matters in her family. Then, later in the evening, Tatsuya receives a shocking text from Seguza stating that the holding facility where the parasites were being held was attacked and the parasites were eliminated. Immediately, he looks up surveillance footage in the areas and sees that Lena is responsible for the attack, which leaves him heartbroken that her agency is making her do crazy stuff like that. Soon after, a gorgeous guy named Raymond takes up his screen to introduce himself as one of the 7 sages Lena once talked about. Raymond reveals that he was the one who told Lena about the parasite's hideout, though it looked like she already knew, so he just wanted him to know that too. He also reveals that Haig, another member of the 7 sages, is behind the anti-magician protests that are growing in the country. He then talks about how Haig is the boss of Hajime, whom Tatsuya caught months back, and also the previous leader of the No-Head Dragon. Since Hajime was captured and the No-Head Dragon lost its headquarters, Haig decided to set up the parasites to come to Japan in hopes of continuing his reign of terror and destroying the use of magic while at it. He also explains that the reason why he is being a tattletale is that he believes magic is a way towards humankind's reformation and promises to spill more tea if he gets spicy information in the future. Before he finally stops his yapping, he instructs Tatsuya to lure all the parasites to a training area the next day and attack them. He then adds that he gave Lena the same information, so he is looking forward to how it is going to play out. The following evening, Tatsuya and his gang head to the training area, only for Shiba to stop them and tell them that she can sense parasites approaching them. Honoka also confirms this and adds that Lena, dressed in her disguise, is rushing towards them. They then rush to go meet the parasites, so when Lena starts to face off with the parasites, determined to win after the not-so-surprising losses she has encountered, Tatsuya and Erika join in the fight to finish off the parasites. After they are done, Tatsuya calls on Mikihiko, who is in the situation room, and he casts a spell to seal the parasites. Unfortunately, Tatsuya sees Lina finish off one of the host bodies, thereby allowing the parasite to escape. He then questions why Lina did not allow them to seal the parasites properly before going on her murder spree, and Lina claims that she is just doing what she had to do to complete the mission assigned to her before running off. After Lina leaves, Erika, who has been watching their interaction from hiding, confirms with Tatsuya that the disguised chick is actually Lina because she could tell from her moves, so Tatsuya tells her to keep it a secret. He also instructs Erika not to eliminate any other parasites because the innocent host body has to die before the parasite can get out, so it is best to disable the parasites from the inside of the hosts. However, Erika does not agree because she was trained to move like that, so he decides to put in more work. Just then, Leo and the others rush towards them, only for them to be ambushed by members of Bado, a Japanese military ground force composed solely of magicians. Leo and the others decide to face them while telling Tatsuya and Miyuki to go after Lina, so they comply. On the way, they see some members of Bado already taken out, and they find out that it is Lina who is still going on her murder mission. When Tatsuya tells her to stop, she tells him to buzz off and continues to fight every parasite she sees. Tatsuya then decides to help her by calling on Miyuki, who casts a spell to stop the parasites from attacking, thereby giving him the chance to shoot them. After that, he calls on Pixie to come join him, while also instructing Honoka to back Pixie up. Though Honoka has no idea of what that means, she tries to get a good read of Pixie's situation first. Pixie continues to run in Tatsuya's direction, oblivious to the fact that some parasites are running after her. So when the parasites suddenly converge in front of her and tell her to return to them, she shakes her head in disapproval. As this is going on, Lina and Tatsuya see them, and Lina immediately asks Tatsuya why the parasites are trying to turn Pixie into a sandwich. Miyuki answers on Tatsuya's behalf, stating that Lina caused it because she did not listen when Tatsuya told her to stop eliminating any parasite host body she sees. Annoyed, Lina claims that she was just carrying out her mission, so when she hears Miyuki tell her to at least clean up properly after, it makes her see red, and she starts to cast various spells at the parasite. Unfortunately, the parasites are unaffected, and they proceed to finish her off, so Tatsuya steps in to help her. Seeing her brother in action, Miyuki joins him, but her sense of vision is not the strongest when it comes to attacking parasites, so Tatsuya calls on Mikihiko to see if he can handle the situation. Mikihiko tells him to hang out a little longer because he is in the process of creating a circle to seal the parasites. Tatsuya advises Mikihiko to try suppressing them with the circle he has formed already, even if it is for 10 seconds, and Mikihiko agrees. Mikihiko then releases a fire spell that starts to burn the parasite while Tatsuya pulls Miyuki closer to help her use his sense of vision to locate the parasites. With that, she casts a spell that immediately turns the parasites to ice, which eventually lets the parasite disappear into a million pieces. The others watch in surprise while Tatsuya pats Miyuki for doing a good job. Lina falls to her knees, completely stunned by what went down, and she wonders what kind of species Miyuki and Tatsuya are exactly. However, Tatsuya instructs Lina to never tell a soul what she saw in exchange for keeping her real identity a secret, and she agrees because that's the only fair way to go about it. With that settled, Tatsuya carries a flushed Miyuki and proceeds to leave, only to stop midway to tell Lina that he can be of help if she ever feels the need to quit working for her agency. Lina quickly makes it clear that she has no plan to quit, so he respects her decision and continues walking. Shortly after they leave, the chairman and Ayako meet in the area, and after introducing herself, Ayako tells him that she knows he is there to pick up the sealed parasites, but Moya also sent her to do the same. With 2 sealed parasites in sight, Ayako suggests they take one each, and the chairman agrees because of his respect for Moya, so Ayako thanks him for his kindness. In the meantime, Tatsuya and Miyuki continue their journey home, and Miyuki uses the chance to ask if Tatsuya has a crush on Lina for him to offer to help her. Tatsuya replies that he was just trying to help Lina because he thinks it would be convenient for her. He also feels like they are alike in a sense, since they both had no other chance to choose their current situation, so he just wanted them to be friends with her. Miyuki hugs him and assures him that one day, his consideration will definitely touch Lina's stone heart. The following morning, Lina thinks about Tatsuya's offer to help her and wonders why he is suddenly trying to act like a hero. She reminisces on the times she went to eliminate the parasites held at the Japan Defense's holding facility because she wanted their souls to rest in peace and not live like demons, since it is her job as her agency's most powerful magician. Now that she thinks of it, she feels like she can actually be something more than a fighting puppet for her agency. A month later, Tatsuya sits in front of a cafe to work on his thesis, only to remember how he and his gang later found out that the sealed parasites they captured were gone. Soon after, Miyuki, Seigusa, and a friend join him to see what he is writing about, and when they find out that it is about how to lengthen spell duration, they encourage him to brag about it more. However, he just wants to know if they enjoyed the farewell party for the third-year students and if they have plans to attend an after-party. So Jumanji joins them to tell him that they just wanted to bid him farewell. Tatsuya thanks them for their thoughtfulness, only for Lina to suddenly interrupt him to lash out at him about how he forced her into helping set up the party when she is not even a member of the student council. Tatsuya assures her that she is a temporary member of the council, but she claims that he is just trying to scam her. Miyuki stops her to tell her that they did plan to make her a temporary member of the student council, so she should stop being rude to her precious brother, especially since she was keen on the idea. Miyuki then starts to spill the tea on how Lina took the job so seriously, and Miyuki tells Tatsuya about how she even got on stage to perform for the students, like a K-pop idol desperate for fame, thereby leaving Lina embarrassed. However, Tatsuya praises her for having a good time, but she just tells him to buzz off. The following day, Tatsuya and the others visit the airport to welcome Shizuku back home since her exchange program is over. They then point out that Shizuku looks more mature, and they ask if she got herself an American boyfriend, but a serious Shizuku just tells Tatsuya that they have a lot to talk about. Shortly after, they go to board a cab, but Tatsuya sees Lina heading to the airport and excuses himself. After catching up with Lina, he and Miyuki confirm that she is returning to America in full style as she brags about how she plans to showcase Japanese culture in America. Miyuki then tells her that she looks forward to her returning soon because she believes she would still take on Tatsuya's offer, but Lina just wishes her all the best because she does not see herself returning and bids them farewell. The following week, some armed men suddenly attack a chick named Minami in her academy, but she blocks each attack in a clean sweep, thereby leading to the men's demise. Unknown to her, Moya was watching her, and she told Hayama, her assistant, to set up a meeting with her. The following day, Miyuri and Tatsuya head to their academy together, and she praises him for how hot he looks in his new uniform, but Tatsuya tells her not to hype him because all the uniform has is a new emblem. In the meantime, Minami meets with Moya, who tells her that she would love her to go to an offshore tower where a party is being held to celebrate the completion of its construction. Apparently, Moya learned that a supremacist group known as the New Breed Front, whose wish is to let magicians have their own life, is planning to visit the tower at the same time that the event is commencing. So she wants Minami to accompany Hayama to the event as a bodyguard with the hopes of trying to investigate what the group is up to. Immediately, she agrees to the mission and promises to go about it diligently. In the meantime, Ayako and her twin brother Fu-Maya are also in town to carry out an investigation regarding the New Breed group under the orders of Maya. Fu-Maya believes that their role is to prevent any form of attack from happening during the tower event and obtain information from the group while at it, but Ayako claims that their role is to just gather intel about the group, and also to source funding at the event. Though Fu-Maya feels it will be bad to just stand aside and do nothing, Ayako tells him to let them focus on what they were instructed to do, which makes him feel sad. The following evening, dignitaries from all over the country gather at the tower for celebration, and Shizuku and Honoeka thank Tatsuya and Miyuki for extending an invitation to them. Miyuki tells them it is fine and urges them to focus on the breathtaking view since they are at the very top of the tower. Instead of taking it all in, Honoka worries that the high building may suddenly collapse, so Tatsuya assures her that the building is supported by 4 gigantic pillars that are stronger than any relationship she has ever been in. He also adds that magicians have also been stationed underground in the building in case things go south, and Miyuki points out that it is quite unusual for magicians to be involved in such safety measures. Just then, Tatsuya and Miyuki notice Hayama from afar, so they excuse themselves to go meet with him. Getting to him, they ask Hayama if he is at the party to represent Moya, and he confirms that Moya sent him to keep an eye on things. Curious, Tatsuya asks if something fishy is going on, but Hayama lets them know that it is because it is the first time magicians are involved in the development of a building, so Moya just wants things to go smoothly. Minami then walks up to them, and Hayama uses the chance to introduce her to Tatsuya and Miyuki. He explains that Minami is a niece of Moya's personal attendant, and he would love for them to call on her if they need any help. Miyuki agrees to do that, so Minami thanks her before leaving with Hayama. Outside the tower, Fu-Maya, disguised as a chick, starts to monitor some suspicious-looking guys heading to the power cables unit, only to be interrupted by Ayako, who tells him to audition for a RuPaul Drag Race show. Ayako then sees the suspicious guys and asks if they should capture them before or after. They tamper with the power cables to see if they work for the New Breed group. Fu-Maya wants them to capture the guys before they tamper with it because that is the sane thing to do, but Ayako tells him that their objective will only work if they wait for them to tamper with the cables, so they can launch a counterattack. Still, Fu-Maya states that he can't let the idiots engage in such despicable acts of terrorism, so Ayako decides to go with his cheap sense of justice. After the suspicious guys make their way into the power cable unit, Ayako casts a teleportation spell that enables Fu-Maya to follow the idiots into the unit. Inside, Fu-Maya notices that the guys are actually magicians who are trying to cut the power cables, and he casts a spell to attack the guys. After he is done, he informs an impressed Ayako, who plans to proceed to the next step, only to see that the building is on the verge of collapsing. So she rushes in to save her brother before they turn to crisps. After that, Ayako and Fumiya teleport the passed-out guys out of the building. While at it, Tatsuya suddenly notices them from inside the building, and he scans them to see that the passed-out guys are actually members of the new breed front. In the meantime, Ayako and Fumiya transport the guys to the ship already stationed for them for further investigation. While Tatsuya sees that Shizuku and the others are occupied, he quickly whispers to Miyuki that Ayako and Fumiya are fighting some guys outside. Immediately, Miyuki figures Hayama must know something about it, but Tatsuya just gives her more deets on how the guys work for the new breed front group, like the walking Wikipedia that he is. Hearing this, Miyuki wonders why such a group is in the tower, and Tatsuya replies that he has no idea yet. At the underground floor of the tower, Kan, the leader of the new breed group, receives intel that the power supply cable has not been tampered with, so he urges the others to move on to the alternative plan for disconnecting the power supply in the building. They then release sleeping gas on the magicians who are supposed to watch the underground of the tower and head out to carry out the plan. Shortly after, the guests at the top of the tower experience a power outage, which makes Tatsuya suspect that the group may be behind it. The group then takes over the screen to introduce themselves to the guest and tell them that magicians are being used as slave labor in the deep bowels of the tower, with no chances to escape if a disaster happens to occur. On that note, the group tells the guests that they will be setting off a bomb in the tower in an hour as a way of protesting against the maltreatment and urges the guests to evacuate if they don't want to turn to barbecue. Hearing this, the guests proceed to the elevator to save their lives while a worried Miyuki turns to Tatsuya to ask what to do next. Tatsuya tells Shizuku and Honoka to follow the others to escape and hands them a flight device they can use to escape if things go south, assuring them that he and Miyuki already have a plan to escape. After they leave, Tatsuya tells Miyuki to follow him, and they go to meet Hayama and Miname. Since he already suspects that Hayama may know something, Tatsuya tells him to start spilling, so Hayama replies that he just knows the group is up to something fishy, but doesn't know the details. Hayama then asks Tatsuya if he can protect the tower, and after getting the go-ahead from Miyuki, he agrees to help out. Hayama suggests they take Minami along with them, claiming that she has been trained to be their personal assistant. Tatsuya scans her and sees that she is dependable, so he tells her to always protect Miyuki, and she quickly agrees to it. After that, Tatsuya creates a pathway that they use to escape from the tower to the ground floor, and they rush to the underground. Inside the underground, he senses that 5 terrorists have taken over the control room. He also notes the number of people currently in the tower, and Miyuki hopes that the terrorists stay true to their word and let the civilians escape before they destroy the building. However, Tatsuya has a strong conviction that they are going to wait because they will lose the support of other magicians and that of the general public if they produce casualties. Just then, an earthquake occurs, and it leaves Honoka and Shizuku stuck in the elevator they are using to escape the tower. Tatsuya tells a worried Miyuki that the earthquake must have stopped the elevator, and only a manual operator can restore the elevator's function. Miyuki then begs Tatsuya to come up with a plan to save them, and he tells her that he will need to get to the control room to do that. Shortly after, they carefully head to the control room, and when Tatsuya moves forward, the terrorists standing guard their riddle bullets into his body, so Minami casts a spell to block the bullets, causing the scared terrorists to run off. Kan then approaches Tatsuya, who respectfully asks that they excuse him to restart the elevator. Kan refuses to give him access, stating that his group will handle it themselves. Tatsuya calls his bluff, stating that they probably don't have a guru in their brain-dead group that can restart an elevator. Still, Kan refuses to give him access and tells him to go back if he wishes to live long. Instead, Minami and Miyuki join Tatsuya, who then shoots Kan's guard for having the effrontery to point their guns at him. Annoyed, Kan calls on his backup squad to attack them, but Minami blocks each hit, and Miyuki uses the chance to turn them to ice. Tatsuya then senses that the terrorists had already used a resonance destruction spell to destroy the tower's pillars, so he rushes towards Kan to check his true identity, and his findings make Miyuki figure that Kan was actually releasing magic to destroy the tower while they were fighting. Tatsuya corrects that he must have had someone else use the magic by having them act under his hypnosis. With that, he instructs them that they have to head underground and save the building before even thinking of restarting the elevator, since that is more important, and they comply. Getting underground, Tatsuya quickly casts a spell to stop the pillars from breaking apart. Minami then focuses on restoring the main pillar with her spell, which eventually makes Honoka and Shizuku reach the ground floor safely, only for the whole building to start breaking apart. Tatsuya figures that focusing on restoring one pillar is causing the other pillars to bear the load of the tower, so he thinks of a way to restore the 4 pillars at the same time. While still lost in thought, Minami stops due to fatigue, thereby causing more damage to the tower, so Miyuki looks at Tatsuya, hoping that her genius brother comes up with something. He then holds on to her to create a spell that helps him gather the tower's structural information, and he integrates it through the regrowth spell on each pillar of the tower. Seeing the transformation leaves Minami stunned, and she wonders if Tatsuya is a god because the power she just saw is too much for a human to handle. Miyuki then checks on him, and he confirms that he is fine but just tired from the stress, so Miyuki guides him to rest on her lap. News of Tatsuya's exploits soon reaches Moya, as Hayama briefs her on how Tatsuya turned over the terrorists to him and escorted Miyuki home like it was just a casual Tuesday. Maya also learns that Minami is resting in her room, and she smiles mischievously because she is cooking up something crazy. Then the following week, Tatsuya heads out to escort new students in for the academy's entrance ceremony, only to find out from Miyuki that Minami will be resuming at the academy as a freshman under Moya's orders. If you made it all the way to the end of this recap, let me know in the comments if you could have any magic ability from the series. Which one would you choose? Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe for more anime recaps. Peace.